Chapter 1. Yu Haoran abruptly opened his eyes and subconsciously formed a seal with his hands. His body instinctively retreated backwards, resisting the destructive force that he imagined was about to sweep over him. However, the weakness that followed and the incomparably silent environment made him suddenly realize that the environment he was in was somewhat different from what he imagined. He quickly scanned his surroundings and found himself in a dimly lit room, lying on a hard-wooden bed. The room's layout was very simple. Other than the hard-wooden bed, there was also a worn-out wooden table and a few chairs with missing arms and legs. How is this possible? Looking at the old and broken furniture in front of him, Yu Haoran's face revealed a blank expression, because the environment in front of him, as well as the simple layout of the room, was very similar to the place where he lived when he was 16 years old. But now, more than 100 years had passed since he was 16 years old. Could it be that I was reincarnated, or was it the final radiance of the setting sun before I died? Yu Haoran shook his head hard, trying to clear his mind as he softly muttered to himself. And just as he was in disbelief of what was happening in front of him, the door was gently pushed open. Then, a 17-year-old girl with an elegant temperament walked in. Although she was wearing a cotton dress, she had an elegant temperament. "Xiao Ran, you're finally awake." Seeing Yu Haoran open his eyes and half sitting on the bed with a blank expression, the young girl's face immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Then, she rushed to the side of the bed in a few steps and tightly hugged him in her arms as she cried out in a choked voice. The familiar body and hair fragrance awakened the memories that had been sealed for a long time. Countless images appeared in his mind, giving him the most realistic feeling. He knew that everything that was happening in front of him was not an illusion. Finally, he responded to the girl's hug with force and excitedly shouted, "Sister." After his emotions had calmed down a little, Yu Haoran glanced at the familiar room from the corner of his eyes and finally confirmed his true situation. So it's all true. I, Yu Haoran, have really been reborn. But it's not like reincarnation. Instead, it's like time is flowing backwards. I've returned to over 100 years ago, to the year when I turned 16, to the moment when my fate changed. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran forcefully suppressed the doubt and shock in his heart and secretly swore, "Big sister, although I don't know why my soul wasn't blown away when the demon god's ancient tomb exploded, since the heavens have allowed me, Yu Haoran, to live once more, then I will definitely change your tragic fate in the future. I will make all those enemies that have humiliated you and me, and all those enemies that have chased down and tried to kill me, Yu Haoran, have their divine souls completely destroyed, never to be reincarnated." Thinking of all the injustice and humiliation he had suffered in his previous life, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Thinking of the oppression and pursuit he had encountered in his previous life, his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Bang! Just as Yu Haoran's thoughts were immersed in his past life's grudges, the half-closed door was suddenly kicked open by someone. Immediately after, a young man of about 18 years old rushed in. This person was handsome, dressed in gorgeous clothes, and had an extraordinary temperament. However, a pair of peach blossom eyes that were suffused with evil light destroyed his overall temperament, giving people a feeling of treachery and insidiousness. Looking at the young man who suddenly burst into the room, Yu Haoran's face changed. He immediately stood up from the bed and questioned in a stiff tone, "Yu Haoqing, what are you doing here?" Yu Haoqing, the only son of the Yu clan's Blue Dragon Hall's Hall Master Yu Hongyang, the only grandson of the great elder of the direct line of descent. He was a hedonistic son who was doted on by everyone. Blue Dragon Hall, the Yu clan's strongest hall, controlled close to 60% of the clan's martial strength. Hall Master Yu Hongyang was a powerful and ruthless person. The great elder, the #1 direct line of descent elder of the Yu clan, not only held great power, but his strength was also unfathomable. It was said that he was one of the top 3 powerhouses of the Yu clan. Because he had such a powerful backer, Yu Haoqing's position in the Yu clan was very special. He could do whatever he wanted. Ouch, I didn't expect you to be so tough. Manager, he's Lotus Palm with 50% of his power didn't take your life. Seeing that Yu Haoran's breathing was stable and his expression was angry, Yu Haoqing was slightly surprised and mocked him. "Yu Haoqing, what do you mean?" Yu Haoran's face instantly darkened at Yu Haoqing's ridicule. His heart immediately burned with rage. As the son of the Yu clan's clan leader, one of the three major clans in Pingyang City, he should have had a very happy life. However, a year ago, there was a secret battle which resulted in the death of both his parents. Moreover, the clan leader's direct line of descent was already very few. The secret battle at that time was even more disastrous. In the end, only he and his sister, Yusiki, were left. This allowed the great elder's line of descent to quickly seize the clan's power. In order to prevent Yu Haoran, the nominal successor of the clan, from affecting his control of the clan's power, the great elder not only expelled him from the direct line of descent for a groundless crime, but also demoted him to an errand boy who chopped firewood and fetched water. What was even worse was that even though he was demoted to an errand boy, the great elder's line of descent did not punish him. Starvation and insults were common occurrences. Punches and kicks were also common occurrences. 2 days ago, because he did not chop enough firewood, the deputy manager in charge of the errand boys, Qing Shan, who was a 5th-grade martial disciple and belonged to the great elder's line of descent, forcefully struck him with a palm. This caused him to be on the brink of death. The great elder's line of descent suppressed him because he was the nominal successor of the Yu clan. It was also because his father, Yu Hongji, was still the #1 expert in Pingyang City. At the age of 37, he was already an expert at the peak of the martial master realm. He was only a step away from breaking through to the martial ancestor realm. His mother's talent was equally outstanding. At the same age, she was already an 8th-grade martial master. They were worried that if Yu Haoran were to inherit his parents' outstanding talent for cultivation and rise again, it would not only affect their control of the clan's power, but it could also possibly ruin their future. After all, the Yu clan was not a monolithic entity. Many of the direct line of descent had always hoped that Yu Haoran would grow up quickly and lead them to rise again like Yu Hongji, once again becoming the overlord of Pingyang City. Ignoring Yu Haoran's questioning, Yu Haoqing's pair of peach blossom eyes, which glowed with an evil light, stared fixedly at Yusiki's plump twin peaks. Yu Haoran's overboard actions suddenly reminded him of a humiliating experience in his previous life. He could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He walked in front of Yusiki and blocked Yu Haoqing's perverted gaze. He gritted his teeth and reprimanded him. Yu Haoqing, don't go too far. Too far. Haha. Facing Yu Haoran's reprimanding through gritted teeth, Yu Haoqing was not the least bit embarrassed. Instead, he laughed maniacally. After laughing for close to 30 seconds, his face suddenly darkened. He then threatened, Yu Haoran, wake up. You are no longer the son of the clan leader, nor are you the future successor of the clan. You are now just a handyman, a servant who cleaves materials and carries water for the clan. Whether you live or die depends entirely on my mood. At this point, Yu Haoqing chuckled and continued to threaten. So, Yu Haoran, if you want to protect your life, if you want to protect the opportunity to rise in the future, and if you want to recreate your father's glory, you better know your place. Otherwise, Chapter 2. Faced with Yu Haoqing's threat, Yu Haoran immediately fell into a predicament. With more than 100 years of cultivation experience in his previous life and the knowledge of a peak martial king, it was not difficult for him to deal with Yu Haoqing, who was only a peak 7th-grade martial disciple. However, he needed a certain amount of time. After all, after his rebirth, he had just turned 16 years old. He was a small martial artist who had barely entered the 1st grade of martial disciple. Not only was his status and identity different from Yu Haoqing's, but his strength was also far inferior to Yu Haoqing's. Yu Haoran, I'll give you 2 choices now. The first choice is to let your sister, Yusiki, follow me obediently and become my woman. This way, not only can you get rid of your status as a servant, you can also enjoy the life of an ordinary clansman. In the future, you will even have the opportunity to practice profound cultivation techniques. Yu Haoran's face became even more gloomy when he heard Yu Haoqing's first choice. He knew that Yu Haoqing's promise was pure nonsense, because the moment his sister loses her chastity, he will lose his value. The second choice, you can continue to refuse, but the result is that you will never see the sun rise tomorrow. Your sister will also not be able to escape the fate of being played by me. Yuhaoran's two choices made him feel as if he had returned to 100 years ago. He had returned to the life of selfishness that made him regret his entire life. Even after killing his enemies, he still could not let go of the humiliation of his life. Boom! Just as Yuhaoran was furious from the humiliation of his previous life, he suddenly felt a tremor in his mind. Then, his vision turned black. When his vision cleared, he found himself standing in a chaotic space. In his 100 years of experience in his previous life, he did not know how many strange things he had experienced. Although he was surprised by the sudden situation in front of him, he did not panic. Instead, he immediately focused on observing. After careful observation, he found that his consciousness was in his sea of consciousness. This was a very strange phenomenon. This was because only with the cultivation of the martial master realm could one condense their consciousness. Only with the cultivation of the martial ancestor realm could one's consciousness enter the sea of consciousness. However, he was only a beginner in martial arts. His cultivation had barely reached the early first grade of martial disciple. It was impossible for his consciousness to appear in the sea of consciousness. Although he felt very strange in his heart, he didn't pursue it too much. Instead, he continued to observe the situation in his sea of consciousness. Then, in the center of his knowledge sea, he saw a tall tower about 100 meters tall, with 9 floors on 4 sides. It was dark in color and had a vigorous aura. Why does it look so familiar? Looking at the tower in the center of his sea of consciousness, a familiar feeling welled up in his heart. Isn't this the small pagoda that was blasted out from the core region when the demon god's ancient tomb exploded? After careful identification, Yuhaoran finally remembered the origin of this pagoda in front of him. In his previous life, he had risked his life and entered the demon god's ancient tomb, which was said to be a place where he had a slim chance of surviving, in order to have a glimpse of the power of law and break through to the martial sage realm. But for some unknown reason, the demon god's ancient tomb that had been silent all this time suddenly began to shake. Then, a massive destructive explosion occurred. The pagoda in front of him was one of the 3 treasures that had flown out from the core region when the ancient tomb exploded. It was also the only treasure that had flown towards him. Although he didn't know why the pagoda had appeared in his sea of consciousness, Yuhaoran didn't pursue it too much. Instead, he walked straight to the bottom of the pagoda, then pushed open the east door of the pagoda and entered the pagoda. Bang! Just as Yuhaoran pushed open the door of the pagoda and stepped into the pagoda, the door behind him quickly closed. This caused him to have a bad feeling in his heart. For the sake of safety, Yuhaoran planned to turn around and reopen the door of the pagoda. At this moment, a greeting came from the pagoda. "Hello, young man. Who is it? Who's there?" Yuhaoran quickly scanned the pagoda hall. Then, he saw an illusory shadow slowly appear in the middle of the originally empty pagoda hall. "Who are you?" Yuhaoran nervously asked as he took a step back with his left leg and assumed a defensive posture. "Young man, there's no need to be nervous. I'm the Thaling of Victor." The illusory shadow in the middle of the pagoda hall replied. "Victor? Thaling?" Yuhaoran softly repeated. He quickly searched his mind for information about Victor, but in the end, he came up with nothing. Helpless, he could only open his mouth and ask, "Thaling, what is Victor? Why did you appear in my sea of consciousness?" The illusory shadow in the middle of the pagoda hall pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "Regarding the origin of Victor and me, it involved a secret between heaven and earth. With your current cultivation and strength, it's not easy for you to know. As for why I appeared in your sea of consciousness, it can be said to be a coincidence, but it's also because I had no other choice." "Thaling, what do you mean by what you said just now?" Yuhaoran was obviously not very satisfied with Thaling's explanation, so he looked straight at Thaling, hoping that it could give him a more detailed or more reasonable explanation. "Young man, among the countless experts that entered the demon god's ancient tomb, your talent and strength can't be said to be the worst. You're basically at the bottom of the list, right?" Thaling asked. Nodding, Yuhaoran did not deny or explain. The demon god's ancient tomb was said to be able to bury gods and demons, which was also the martial god's ancient tomb. When the demon god's ancient tomb opened, most of the martial artists that entered were peak powerhouses at the martial saint realm, and there were even some peerless powerhouses at the martial saint realm. Thus, what the pagoda spirit said just now was basically true, and there was nothing he could refute. When the demon god's ancient tomb exploded, it's reasonable to say that I should choose a more powerful and talented expert sea of consciousness as the place to heal. But in the end, I chose you because you're the only one that I escaped in the direction of the explosion. Under the circumstances, I had no choice but to choose your sea of consciousness as the place to heal. Thowling somewhat unwillingly explained. Regarding this, although Yuhauran was somewhat uncomfortable in his heart, he knew that what Thowling said just now was basically true, so he didn't say anything more. Young man, choosing your sea of consciousness as the place to heal was really an act of desperation, so don't expect me to help you unconditionally. Frowning slightly, Yuhauran's face suddenly showed displeasure. Although you chose me because you had no choice, you're now using my sea of consciousness to heal, so it's reasonable for you to give me, the person who provided you with a place to live, some benefits. Now, since you can't provide any help, then what's the use of keeping you? So Yuhauran unceremoniously drove you away. Thowling, I'm sure you understand the current situation. After leaving the demon god's ancient tomb and returning to the past, you're no longer in danger. So I hope you can leave my sea of consciousness immediately and return it to its original state. Chapter 3. Inside the Victor. As Thowling waved his hand at the wall behind him, the originally dark wall gradually became transparent. Through the gradually transparent wall, Yuhauran saw the strange scene outside the Victor. Outside the Victor, in the room, the complacent Yuhauching and the pensive Yusiki seemed to have been frozen, standing there motionless. Thowling, what's going on? Pointing at the strange scene outside the Victor, Yuhauran asked in horror. Young man, don't panic. This is one of my abilities. I can accelerate the flow of time in the tower. One day outside the tower is 1,000 years inside the tower, Thowling replied arrogantly. This. After hearing Thowling's explanation, Yuhauran was shocked and gradually excited. With more than 100 years of experience, the cultivation experience of a peak martial emperor, and the best cultivation methods, as long as he was given a certain amount of time, he was confident that he could quickly grow and face any predicament. And Thowling's ability to accelerate time could perfectly solve the predicament he was facing, allowing him to face any difficulty with ease. But the excitement did not last long. Yuhauran completely calmed down, because Thowling said at the beginning that he would not help him unconditionally. In other words, perhaps he could only look at the ability to accelerate time, but he would not have the opportunity to use it. Young man, the ancient tomb of the demon god contains a terrifying power that you can't imagine. The destructive power of the ancient tomb, when it exploded, was enough to destroy the world. In order to resist the destructive power of the ancient tomb, I have consumed too much energy. Now I can only temporarily stay in your sea of consciousness to heal. Thowling saw Yuhauran's excitement and expectation, as well as his disappointment at the end. He knew that his ability to accelerate time was an unimaginable temptation to him, so he took the opportunity to put forward his conditions. Young man, I won't occupy your sea of consciousness for nothing. As an exchange, you can use some precious treasures in exchange for the opportunity to accelerate time. The exchange conditions given by Thowling did not excite Yuhauran. He knew that Thowling, who had the ability to accelerate time, would need extraordinary treasures in exchange. They might even be rare treasures that he had never seen in his previous life. Therefore, he asked cautiously, Thowling, what kind of treasures do I need in exchange for the opportunity to accelerate time? Vitality. Thowling said. Vitality. Yuhauran could not help but change his expression. Vitality represented a person's life force, represented a person's lifespan. The stronger the vitality of an ordinary person, the longer they would live and the healthier their bodies would be. For warriors, vitality not only did it affect their lifespan and health, it was also related to potential. Potential was the foundation that determined whether or not a warrior could advance quickly. It determined the strength of a warrior, and it was also one of the foundations that determined how high a warrior could achieve in the future. In his previous life, The reason why he took the risk to enter the demon god's ancient tomb to search for the power of laws was that he had overdrawn too much of his vitality in the early stages. This led to a shallow foundation, and he could not rely on his own comprehension to peek into the power of laws. Therefore, after his rebirth, he did not want to lose the opportunity to reach the peak of martial arts because of some difficulties. Young man, exchanging vitality for enough time to cultivate is a loss for others, and even damaging to their foundation. However, for you, there is not much of a loss. After all, with more than 100 years of experience, you must know some secret methods to increase your vitality. You must also know where to hide rare treasures that can increase vitality. When the time comes, you can rely on those secret methods and rare treasures to make up for the lost vitality. Seeing Yuhaoran's hesitation, Faling patiently persuaded him. Vitality was equal to time. Time was equal to vitality. If it wasn't for the fact that its current injuries required life force that was deeply connected to the law of time, it wouldn't have been willing to consume Yuhaoran's life force. This was because it was heavily injured, and now its vitality was intertwined with Yuhaoran's. If something happened to Yuhaoran, it would be difficult for it to escape. Therefore, using vitality in exchange for time acceleration was not only to help it heal, but also to encourage Yuhaoran to desperately cultivate and become stronger as soon as possible. After all, when the demon god's ancient tomb exploded, it was not the only one that escaped. At the same time, among the treasures that escaped the ancient tomb, there was a treasure that wanted to devour it and perfect its own laws. Then, it would break through the shackles of an artifact and become a living being with its own life. Glancing at Yuhaoqing and Yusiki in the room, and recalling some of his future experiences, Yuhaoran finally decided to agree to Faling's proposal, using vitality in exchange for time to cultivate. Faling, how do you want to exchange? Equal exchange. 1 day of vitality in exchange for 1 day of cultivation. 1 month of vitality in exchange for 1 month of cultivation. 1 year of vitality in exchange for 1 year of cultivation. Seeing that Yuhaoran was interested in the exchange, Faling quickly responded. Faling, I will now use 3 months of vitality in exchange for 3 months of cultivation. After careful calculation, Yuhaoran finally decided to exchange for 3 months of cultivation. Okay, Faling nodded. Then, it changed its tone and said in a slightly annoyed tone. However, because of the explosion of the demon god's ancient tomb, I consumed too much energy, and my control of time is only 1/10,000th of my peak. So now I can only accelerate time for 1 day outside the tower for 1 month. Okay, after carefully estimating the time needed to improve his cultivation, Yuhaoran nodded and agreed. He felt that this speed of time acceleration was just right to change his current predicament. Seeing that Yuhaoran agreed to the exchange of time, Faling pointed at Yuhaoran's body in the room outside the tower, and then a trace of white gas slowly floated out from the top of his head. After the white gas left his body, Yuhaoran suddenly felt weak in his mind. He knew that this was the result of the loss of vitality. After the white gas that represented vitality was integrated into the victor, Faling pointed at Yuhaoran's mind, and then an illusory tower seal was integrated into his mind. Young man, this is the victor's seal. With this seal, you can enter the victor at any time to cultivate, and you can also contact me through the seal. Speaking of this, Faling was silent for a moment, and then said, if you have any doubts in reality, you can also ask me through the seal. Chapter 4. Young Master You. As long as you can let Haoran leave his status as a servant and let him live a normal life, and not be bullied and humiliated by his clansmen, I'm willing to go with you. Just as Yuhaoran's consciousness returned to his body, Yusiki, who was deep in thought, suddenly spoke. Siki, it's not like you don't know my temperament. I've always kept my word. You can rest assured about this. Seeing that Yusiki had finally agreed to become his woman, Yuhaoqing patted his chest excitedly and promised. Yusiki was not only the most beautiful woman in the Yu clan, but also the most beautiful woman in Pingyang City. Even the clothes she was wearing now were unable to hide her peerless beauty, her elegant temperament, and her impressive figure. The only flaw was that her personality was too unyielding. Otherwise, with his current status and power, he would have forcefully occupied her long ago. There was no need for him to use threats and promises to force her to submit. Now that she was willing to submit obediently, his threats and threats were not in vain. Wait! At this moment, Yuhaoran suddenly opened his mouth to stop him. Having suddenly lost 3 months of vitality, Yuhaoran, who had returned to his physical body, felt a little uncomfortable, so he adjusted himself slightly. But what he did not expect was that Yusiki would be willing to sacrifice herself for him. Yusiki's act of sacrificing herself for others touched him greatly, and the self-blame in his heart grew even stronger. Even if Victor and Thaling did not appear, he would not let Yusiki sacrifice her chastity and life for him, even if she had to pay the price with her own life. Moreover, with the help of Victor and Thaling, it would not be difficult to get rid of Yuhaoqing. How could he repeat the tragedy of his previous life? Yuhaoran, your sister has already agreed. Do you have a different opinion? Yuhaoran's intervention made Yuhaoqing very dissatisfied and angry. He looked at Yuhaoran with a murderous look that was difficult to suppress. Yuhaoqing knew Yusiki too well. He knew that after losing her parents, all her thoughts were on Yuhaoran. If Yuhaoran did not agree to this matter, Yusiki would definitely not be willing to become his woman, let alone obediently go with him. Yuhaoqing, according to the closeness of our bloodlines, you and I are both above the 5th fold, so you are qualified to be my elder sister's man. But no matter what, my elder sister and I are the children of the patriarch, and the blood of the direct descendants of the patriarch flows in our veins. Our status and bloodlines are far more honorable than yours. Yuhaoran could clearly see the murderous intent in Yuhaoqing's eyes. He knew that he couldn't provoke Yuhaoqing for the time being. Otherwise, Yuhaoqing would probably attack him out of anger. Therefore, he began to use schemes to stall for time. 3 days. As long as he could stall for 3 days, using Victor's time acceleration ability, he was confident that he would be able to break through to the 4th grade of martial disciple. Then, relying on the battle experience from his previous life, his cultivation experience as a peak martial king, as well as the exquisite martial skills he had mastered, it wouldn't be difficult for him to defeat Yuhaoqing, who was only at the peak of the 7th grade of martial disciple. As for whether or not the Great Elder and the others would be afraid of him, and whether or not they would take revenge, Yuhaoran wasn't too worried. According to the memories of his previous life, the Great Elder, Yu Hongyang, and the others had already quietly left the Patriarch for the sex selection in a month. They wouldn't be back for at least half a month. As for half a month later, he had a way to deal with the Great Elder and the others. Yuhaoqing, if you want to get my elder sister, you can, but you must marry her officially. Therefore, you need the permission of the elders, especially the Great Elder. This, Yuhaoran's proposal, made Yuhaoqing feel a bit awkward. As the only grandson of the Great Elder, Yuhaoqing knew his family's attitude towards Yuhaoran and Yusiki. If it wasn't because he wanted to possess Yusiki and tried his best to stop his grandfather and the others from taking action, the siblings would have been secretly disposed of long ago. Therefore, it would be very difficult for him to marry Yusiki officially. However, when he thought of how much his grandfather spoiled him, and how he would find a way to cripple Yuhaoran after marrying Yusiki and eliminate the hidden danger that he would bring in the future, Yuhaoqing's originally hesitant attitude immediately became firm. Okay, I'll go beg my grandfather now and ask him to agree to my marriage with Siki. Yuhaoqing nodded and agreed. Then, he stared at Yusiki lecherously and said, Siki, you don't have to worry. I think my grandfather will definitely agree to our marriage. After Yuhaoqing left the room, Yuhaoran closed the door and couldn't help but spit. Then, he looked straight into Yusiki's eyes and said, Sister, do you believe me? Xiaoran, what are you talking about? You're my only family in this world. How can I not believe you? Yuhaoran's inexplicable questioning obviously made Yusiki very dissatisfied, and at the same time, there was a trace of doubt in her heart. This was because she felt that the Yuhaoran after waking up was a little different from before. Since being expelled from the family and demoted to a handyman, Yuhaoran was not as lively as before. He became very gloomy and basically didn't talk to anyone. Even with her, his only family in this world, he didn't say a word. However, today he not only took the initiative to talk, but also considered everything for her. If she didn't know her brother very well and was familiar with his every move, she was afraid that she would have doubted whether the person in front of her was her biological brother. Sister, I just agreed to Yu Haoqing's marriage. In fact, it was just a delaying tactic. I will never let you marry that bastard. Yu Haoran patted his chest and promised. Xiao Ran, it's okay. As long as you can live well, I'm willing to do anything. Yusiki said gently. Sister, I know how you feel, so please believe in your brother. Believe that I have the ability to solve this problem. Yu Haoran said solemnly. He couldn't tell Yusiki about his rebirth and Victor, so Yu Haoran planned to seize the time to cultivate. He wanted to prove with practical actions that he was just a delaying tactic and that he didn't want her to marry Yu Haoqing. Then, he opened the door and said to Yusiki, Sister, it's getting late. You should go back and rest. All right. Nodding her head, Yusiki stepped into the room. After Yusiki left the room, Yu Haoran quickly closed the door. He used a chair to block the door, and then sat cross-legged on the bed. He touched the mark left by the thowing with his mind. Then, he disappeared from the room and reappeared inside the victor. He reached out and pinched his arm. The real feeling made him realize that his physical body had also appeared inside the victor. This method shocked him. Because of his experience in his previous life, he didn't know how many rare treasures he had seen. He had even seen legendary venerable weapons. However, he had never seen or heard of a treasure that could contain living things. Therefore, he suspected that the victor was an existence that surpassed venerable weapons. It might even be the legendary emperor weapon. Of course, the shock and suspicion didn't last long. Chapter 5. A martial artist cultivation was divided into 10 ranks. Each rank was divided into 9 ranks, from the lowest to the highest. Martial disciple, martial warrior, and martial master were in the early stages of cultivation. They focused on unblocking and expanding the 8 extraordinary meridians, strengthening the body, and tempering the origin energy. Martial grandmaster, martial king, and martial emperor were in the middle stages of cultivation. They focused on tempering, condensing, and strengthening the 3 souls and 7 spirits in the mind. Martial saint, martial honor, and Emperor Wu were in the late stages of cultivation. They focused on understanding, borrowing, and controlling the power of laws. As for martial gods, they were in the divine demon realm. According to legends, the divine demon realm cultivators merged the power of laws into their bodies. They were blessed by the heavens and earth. They could break through the void and travel through the stars. They could even create new lives. However, legends were legends. In his 100 years of experience in his previous life, he had only heard of peerless powerhouses in the martial emperor realm, but had never truly seen one, let alone divine demons in the martial god realm. Even when he entered the ancient tomb that was said to have buried a demon god, he did not find any trace of a martial god powerhouse. Of course, martial gods and Emperor Wu were too far away from him. Before his rebirth, his cultivation was only at the peak of martial emperor. Therefore, he only needed to focus on the cultivation in front of him. The Heart Sutra of Supreme Mystery came from the Taishu sect, one of the 7 major forces in the Tianxian continent. It was the Taishu sect's treasure. Those who were not of the sect master's bloodline could not cultivate it. He had accidentally poisoned the illegitimate son of the Taishu sect master in his past life. Because of this, he had been hunted by the Taishu sect's elites for more than 30 years. Until his rebirth, he had not been able to escape from the Taishu sect's elites. The Heart Sutra of Supreme Mystery was said to be a supreme technique that could allow one to surpass Emperor Wu and become a martial god. It was a peerless technique that countless martial artists dreamed of. It was also the reason why the Taishu sect had not been destroyed for tens of thousands of years. Unfortunately, he had only obtained 2/3 of the Heart Sutra of Supreme Mystery. He could only cultivate it to the peak of martial saint. Moreover, when he obtained this technique in his past life, his cultivation was already at the peak of martial king. His spirit was condensed, and his origin energy was formed. He could not disperse his cultivation and cultivate other techniques. Therefore, He had only used it as a reference and never cultivated it. This was one of his few regrets in his past life. Now that he had just started learning martial arts, his soul had yet to condense, and his origin energy had just formed. It was the best time to cultivate this cultivation method. Yuhaoran carefully recalled the contents of the Great Mystery Heart Sutra, and then combined it with the experience of his previous life. He began to cultivate for the first time after his rebirth. Victor's cultivation experience from his previous life combined with the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, which was far superior to the outside world, allowed him to quickly enter a deep level of cultivation. 10 minutes later, he truly experienced the power of this technique, which was said to be able to surpass Emperor Wu and advance to the God-Fiend realm. At the beginning of a martial artist's cultivation, they would first use the method of meditation to sense the scattered spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Then, they would use the cultivation method to guide the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into their dantian and transform it into the powerful origin energy. However, due to the limitations of one's physique, talent, experience, and cultivation method, the amount of heaven and earth spirit chi that a martial artist could sense and guide in the beginning was not much, let alone convert it into origin energy that could impact the meridians. If the amount of heaven and earth spirit chi that could be converted into origin energy in his previous life was 1, then the amount of origin energy that could be converted into origin energy after his rebirth would probably be more than 10 or even 15. The rich heaven and earth spirit chi poured into his dantian like a tide. Under the guidance of his will, under the powerful transformation of the Great Mystery Heart Sutra, traces of origin energy began to impact the first meridian of the 8 extraordinary meridians, the Yang Wei meridian. 5 hours later, as the Yang Wei meridian was opened by a third, the cultivation of the early first-grade martial disciple smoothly stepped into the middle first-grade martial disciple. 10 hours later, as the Yang Wei meridian was opened by 2/3, the cultivation of the middle first-grade martial disciple smoothly advanced to the high first-grade. 20 hours later, as the Yang Wei meridian was completely opened, the cultivation of the high first-grade martial disciple smoothly advanced to the peak first-grade. After his cultivation reached the peak of the first-grade martial disciple, Yuhaoran did not stop the rapid circulation of the Great Mystery Heart Sutra. He continued to use origin energy to strengthen the newly opened meridians. An hour later, as a crisp sound came from within his body, a not-so-powerful aura quickly rose from his body. At the same time, his cultivation smoothly broke through to the early second-grade martial disciple. After a simple consolidation of his cultivation after the breakthrough, Yuhaoran slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid chi accumulated in his chest, and then opened his eyes. 36 hours, a day and a half, his cultivation had directly advanced by grade. His cultivation speed was more than 10 times faster than in his previous life, and his foundation was solid, without a trace of hidden danger. Facing such a fast cultivation speed, facing such a solid foundation, Yuhaoran could not help but feel a trace of joy in his heart. Martial disciple, the initial stage of a martial artist cultivation, was to open the 8 extraordinary meridians in the body and connect the meridians as auxiliary. Every time a meridian was opened, every time a meridian was connected, the cultivation would advance by a grade. However, due to the influence of the turbid chi, when a martial artist came into contact with martial arts at the age of 16, the 8 extraordinary meridians in the body were all blocked. If one wanted to open these meridians, not only would they have to endure great pain, they would also need a certain amount of origin energy. Therefore, it could be said that breaking through to the martial disciple realm was a process of patience, a gradual process. Originally, he thought that even with the cultivation experience of his previous life and the abundant spirit energy in the victor, it would take at least 10 days to open the first meridian. Moreover, according to the order of the meridians, if he wanted to open the remaining meridians, it would take at least double the time. 3 months, according to his own experience, was the limit of the 4th grade martial disciple realm. However, what he did not expect was that the abundant spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the territory tower, coupled with the cultivation experience of his previous life and the power of the Supreme Mystery Heart Sutra, greatly reduced the time needed to open up his meridians. This gave him more time to improve his cultivation, and he also had enough time to practice his martial skills. He even used his martial skills to strengthen his foundation and increase his potential. Taking a deep breath, Yuhaoran calmed his joyful heart and stood up. He did not continue to use origin energy to open the meridians because he was very clear in his heart that the realm was only the strength he possessed. If he wanted to convert strength into strength, he needed to do so through martial arts. Barbaric Bull Fist Technique. An upgraded version of the basic fist technique. It was a technique that martial artists used to familiarize themselves with the origin energy in their body at the beginning of their cultivation. This technique was passed down to him by his master, who treated him like his own father after he entered the sect in his previous life. At that time, his master's guidance was very special and strict. Before he completely grasped the essence of the barbaric bull fist technique, he was not allowed to come into contact with any other techniques, even if they were higher-ranked martial arts or sword techniques. At first, he did not understand and blamed his master for it. But when he broke through to the martial king realm and advanced to the martial king realm, he finally understood his master's good intentions. The barbaric bull fist technique not only allowed martial artists to better adapt to the origin energy in their dantian, but when they used origin energy to activate the barbaric bull fist technique, the origin energy would refine the body and meridians without you noticing. Inch by inch, it would temper the 3 souls and 7 spirits, increasing one's potential little by little. In his previous life, he had been able to raise his cultivation to the peak of the martial emperor realm, even though he had overdrawn his life force many times. Aside from some precious elixirs and secret techniques, it was also largely related to the solid foundation he had built with the reckless bull fist skill. Chapter 6. Raging Bull Revolution. Squatting down, Yuhaoran mobilized the remaining energy in his dantian and suddenly rushed forward. But when he was less than 2 meters away, his whole body twisted in a very strange posture and quickly punched out with his left fist. Along with the punch, the energy in his left arm stirred up the surrounding air and quickly formed a faint white bull's head. The white bull's head heavily hit the air. Although the white bull's head formed by the Raging Bull Revolution did not seem to have any changes in the air with the naked eye, Yuhaoran felt very satisfied with the punch just now. This was the first time he practiced the fist technique after his rebirth. Through the posture and strength of the punch just now, he had already displayed 70% of the Raging Bull Revolution's power. It was enough to break open a monument and crush stones. Fighting above his level had already exceeded his expectations. Suppressing the joy in his heart, he continued to practice the remaining moves of the Raging Bull Fist technique. Raging Bull Rush. Raging Bull tramples the sky. Raging Bull seizes the moon. 1 month later, with the 3rd meridian, the Yang Heel meridian, completely opened, Yuhaoran's cultivation smoothly entered the peak of the 3rd grade martial disciple. Next, he only needed to consolidate the 3rd meridian that he had just opened and connect it with the first 2 meridians. Then, he would be able to smoothly enter the 4th grade of martial disciple and achieve the goal he had set at the beginning. His heart was neither happy nor sad. Taking a deep breath, Yuhaoran planned to break through to the 4th grade martial disciple in one go and face the threat of Yuhaoqing head-on. He could not help but frown. Although he had entered the victor to cultivate, he could clearly feel everything outside the victor through the imprint that Thaling had left in his mind. Just now, he clearly felt the sound of hurried knocking on his door. Ever since he was expelled from the family and demoted to a servant, his personality gradually became more and more solitary. Usually, he was taciturn and rarely talked to others. Apart from his servants and the deputy steward who often bullied him, he did not know anyone else in the servant district. At this time, only a few maidservants who had a good relationship with his sister would be able to find him and knock on the door very politely. Although it was important to break through to the 4th grade of martial disciple in one go, compared to his sister's safety, the breakthrough was obviously insignificant. Therefore, Yuhaoran hurriedly got up, touched the imprint with his mind, and instantly returned to the room. He removed the chair that was blocking the door and quickly opened it. Then, he saw a young girl of about 18 or 19 years of age. Her appearance and figure were very ordinary. She was standing outside the door with an anxious look on her face. "You Howren, come with me. Your elder sister is in trouble." The moment Yu Howren opened the door, the girl standing outside hurriedly said, "Sister Lan Hui, what happened to my sister?" Although he had already guessed it in his heart, Yu Howren couldn't help but feel nervous when he heard that something had happened to his sister. "There's no time to explain. Let's talk while we walk," the girl called Lan Hui said anxiously as she reached out to grab Yu Howren's arm. "Wang Ru, you wretched bitch." After hearing Lan Hui explain in detail the humiliation that Yu Seekin had suffered, Yu Howren couldn't suppress the murderous aura that rose in his heart. He gritted his teeth and growled. As one of the 3 great clans in Pingyang City, the Yu clan's rules were more lenient towards their clansmen. However, to the lowly servants and maids, the clan's rules were harsh and cruel. If they made a mistake, the light punishment would be docking their salary and scolding. The heavy punishment would be corporal punishment and whipping. They could even lose their lives. As the targets of the great elders' faction's deliberate suppression, he and Yusiki were especially targeted. Not only were they suppressed and humiliated everywhere, but their daily workload was also extremely heavy. Other than the 4 hours of basic sleeping time, they had no free time at all. Because he was injured by manager He 2 days ago, he had been unconscious and needed someone to take care of him. Therefore, Yusiki could only sacrifice her sleeping time to take care of him. As a result, she hadn't slept properly for 3 days and 2 nights. Under the severe lack of sleep, she couldn't concentrate. In the end, when she was cleaning the room, she accidentally broke an ordinary tea set in the room of second elder's eldest granddaughter, Yusaiden. Such an incident of accidentally breaking an ordinary tea set wasn't a serious matter. At most, she would be scolded and have her salary deducted. However, when this incident happened to Yusiki, it was magnified by Wang Ru, who was in charge of managing the servants. It even escalated to the extent of violating the clan's rules. Now, she was in Yusaiden's courtyard, enduring Wang Ru's whipping. Thinking about how his sister's cultivation had been crippled, her body had been very weak. Furthermore, she didn't have enough nutrition and rest on a daily basis. He was afraid that she wouldn't be able to withstand the other party's whipping. Her life could be in danger at any time. Burning with anxiety, Yu Howren hurriedly channeled a trace of elemental energy into his arm. He shook it slightly and directly shook off Lan Hui's tightly clenched hand. Then, he sped up and rushed to the courtyard where his sister was being punished. Seeing Yu Howren leave in a hurry, the anxious expression on Lan Hui's face disappeared. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a sly smile of having succeeded in her scheme. When Yu Howren rushed to the courtyard where Yusiki was being punished, through the open door, he saw a fierce woman around 40 years old with a waist as thick as a bucket. She was waving a whip covered in kerosene, ruthlessly whipping Yusiki's back. "Wang Ru, you bitch, you're courting death." Seeing his sister's bloodied back and pale face, Yu Howren couldn't help but roar angrily. Then, he directly rushed into the courtyard. The pain caused by the whip and the weakness caused by excessive blood loss caused Yusiki to be in a trance. She was completely unaware of what was happening outside, but when she heard the familiar roar, her spirit suddenly shook. She hurriedly raised her head and saw Yu Howren rushing into the courtyard with a murderous look on his face. Thinking that Wang Ru was not only a confidant of the Great Elder, but also a vicious and merciless expert who had reached the peak of the 4th grade of martial disciple, she couldn't help but change her expression and hurriedly shouted, "Xiaoran, this is not a place where you should be. Go back immediately." "Haha, brat, you want to leave now? It's already too late." Wang Ru turned around and said with a sinister smile. As the deacon in charge of the family servants, Wang Ru's position in the servant district was very high. Moreover, her strength had already reached the peak of the 4th grade of martial disciple. In the servant district, she was ranked in the top 10. At the same time, she was also the great elder's confidant and Yu Haoqing's nanny. In the entire servant district, other than the 3 deacons, no one dared to contradict her. let alone insult her to her face. Therefore, Yuhaoran's insult just now really aroused the killing intent in her heart. Deacon Wang, this servant begs you. As long as you let my brother go back, this servant will do anything you want. Chapter 7. Turning around, Wang Ru laughed sinisterly. Not only did she not agree to Yusiki's pleading, her originally ferocious face revealed a trace of a happy smile. As the son of the previous patriarch, Yuhaoran, and the nominal successor of the Yu clan, Yuhaoran had always been a thorn in the first elder's side. There was never a moment when he didn't secretly want to get rid of him to prevent future troubles. If it wasn't for someone secretly obstructing and protecting him, he wouldn't have been able to live until now. Today, not only did he forcibly break into Miss Yusiden's courtyard, breaking the rules of the clan, but he also insulted him to his face and contradicted his superiors, giving him a chance to act. If he could take this opportunity to get rid of Yuhaoran, he wouldn't offend that person and wouldn't give that person a chance to retaliate against him. He would also definitely receive a reward from the first elder. From there, he would be able to take a step forward and be promoted to the deputy general manager of the servant district. He might even be promoted to general manager and completely control the life and death of the hundreds of servants and servants in the Yu clan. Sister, I promised you yesterday that I wouldn't let you suffer any grievances or harm in the future, so you don't need to beg this bitch. She's not worth your pleading. Looking at the crying Yusiki, Yuhaoran's eyes flashed with a trace of tenderness. He then took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the killing intent in his heart. Then, he raised his head and looked straight at Wang Ru. Bitch, ever since I, Yuhaoran, woke up, I swore to the heavens that if anyone dared to humiliate and harm my sister, I would destroy their soul and never let them reincarnate. Now, you're the first person to make me fulfill my oath. Ha! In the eyes of the crowd, Yuhaoran's serious threat didn't have any deterrence at all. Not only did Wang Ru couldn't help but laugh wildly, most of the servants of the scene also held back their laughter. Even her subordinates began to mock and ridicule. Ridiculous! Deacon Wang is not only the first elder's confidant and young Master Haoqing's nanny, but also a fourth-grade martial disciple expert who has mastered the beginner martial skill Lotus Palm. A lowly slave who hasn't even grown hair dares to say such arrogant and ignorant words. I think he must have lost his mind. That's right. The way I see it, he probably still thinks that he's the son of the patriarch, the young patriarch of the Yu clan. Everyone must listen to his orders. Whoever he wants to die, they must die. Just watch. With Deacon Wang's methods, that brat will soon regret his arrogance and ignorance just now, regret that he came to this world. Compared to her subordinates mocking and ridiculing, Wang Ru suddenly calmed down after a wild laughter and unexpectedly became kind. Yuhaoran, don't say that I, Wang Ru, bullied you because of my age and strength. Next, I will stand still. As long as you can make me move one step, not only will I not pursue the matter of you insulting me just now, I will also not pursue the matter of your sister accidentally breaking the tea set. As the confidant of the first elder, Wang Ru knew some things about the clan. Taking advantage of the previous patriarch Yu Hongji's disastrous loss, the great elder quickly took control of the clan, but it was difficult for him to fully control it in a short time. The reason for this came from the ninth elder, Yu Honghu. Yu Honghu, the ninth elder of the Yu clan, was in charge of the clan's punishments. He was an impartial person. At the age of 40, Yu Honghu was already a 5th-grade martial master. His talent and strength were second only to the previous patriarch Yu Hongji and his wife. He was the second strongest person in the Yu clan's direct descendants. It was because of Yu Honghu's secret protection that Yuhaoran and Yusiki could survive until now. It was also because of Yu Honghu's strength that Wang Ru knew that she couldn't kill Yuhaoran too obviously, because just now, she vaguely saw a figure flash by outside the door. It was a familiar and fearful person. She knew that person was Yu Honghu's confidant, and also the expert who secretly protected Yuhaoran and Yusiki for Yu Honghu. Therefore, she couldn't kill Yuhaoran openly. She could only defend and counterattack, pretending to accidentally kill Yu Haoran to avoid being caught by that person. Although he didn't know why Wang Ru suddenly became so kind, Yu Haoran wasn't affected at all. The killing intent in his heart didn't decrease in the slightest. Mobilizing 5 layers of origin energy in his dantian, he took a step back with his right leg and slightly moved his body forward. Then, he used the Reckless Bull colliding fist technique and rushed towards Wang Ru. The impact of the Reckless Bull colliding fist stirred up the surrounding air, making the charging Yu Haoran look like a white Reckless Bull. Not good. Seeing Yu Haoran charging towards her like a white Reckless Bull, Wang Ru's face couldn't help but change when she felt the powerful force of the Reckless Bull colliding fist technique. In her opinion, the life of an odd job worker and the pressure of vice director, he would never give Yu Haoran enough time to cultivate. Therefore, she thought that Yu Haoran was at most an early first-grade martial disciple, and this was under the premise that he might have inherited his parents' outstanding talent. However, she didn't expect that in just a short month, Yu Haoran's cultivation had reached the peak of third-grade martial disciple. His talent was far more monstrous than his parents'. Fortunately, although Yu Haoran's exposed cultivation was unexpected, it was still within her acceptable range. Therefore, she crossed her arms and blocked in front of her body, intending to take the impact head-on. Bang! After her shoulders and arms collided, Wang Ru immediately felt a sharp pain in her arms. Moreover, the impact of the collision caused her to involuntarily take 5 steps back. On the other hand, Yu Haoran. Not only did he not take half a step back, his expression didn't change at all. The difference between the two was obvious. Impossible. How can you be so strong? Resisting the sharp pain in her arms, Wang Ru looked at Yu Haoran in disbelief. She couldn't accept the result of the exchange just now. Wang Ru couldn't accept the result of the exchange just now. Yu Haoran was also dissatisfied with the result of the exchange just now. Although he only used 50% of his Yuan Qi, with the quality of his Yuan Qi transformed by the Supreme Mystery Heart Sutra, his understanding of the barbaric bull fist technique, his 100 years of battle experience, and the eyesight of a peak martial king, the power of the barbaric bull charge just now was at least at the peak of 4th-grade martial disciple. In his opinion, to be able to use the barbaric bull charge of a peak 4th-grade martial disciple, even if it couldn't take Wang Ru's life, it should have at least seriously injured her. However, the result was that she only suffered a light injury. The reason was that he made a mistake in his judgment. Although Wang Ru's strength was only at the peak of 4th-grade martial disciple, her body was very strong. In a situation where she chose to meet force with force, her strong body could withstand a certain amount of the impact. Therefore, the result of the exchange just now was that she only suffered a light injury. Yu Haoran's self-reflection caused Wang Ru to mistakenly think that he was looking down on her. This made her feel very angry. Resisting the sharp pain in her arms, she directly used all of her Yuan Qi and used the most powerful lotus palm technique she had ever used. Moreover, it was the most powerful palm technique. Chapter 8. Lotus Dance. Wang Ru, who had used all her strength, shot out her palms at lightning speed, instantly forming a sky full of palm techniques. Full of flaws. Looking at the sky full of palm techniques, Yu Haoran couldn't help but smile mockingly. Facing the sky full of palm techniques, others might feel that it was very difficult to deal with, but in his eyes, it was full of flaws. If it was said that Wang Ru could still rely on her strong body to offset a portion of the force from the previous head-on collision, then after using the beginner martial skill Lotus Flower Palm technique, all the advantages she had were gone. Raging Bull Roar. With a low roar, Yu Haoran took a step forward with his right foot to meet the sky full of palm techniques. At the same time, he threw out a fist technique, which was the strongest attack of the Raging Bull fist technique, the Raging Bull Roar. The white bull head formed by the fist technique roared and rushed into the sky full of palm techniques. Moo! In an instant, only the roar of a raging bull could be heard. Then, the sky full of palm techniques disappeared and a huge figure rushed into the sky. Then, like a stone that was thrown out, it fell heavily to the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. When everyone saw that the person who had fallen to the ground was not Yu Haoran as they had imagined, but Wang Ru, whom they had always feared and praised, all of them were dumbfounded. Especially Wang Ru's subordinates, their faces turned pale instantly. They couldn't accept the result of the fight. In the Yu clan, Wang Ru, who was a high fourth-grade martial disciple, was at the bottom of the list. However, in the servant district, she was definitely one of the top 10 masters and had mastered the powerful lotus palm technique. What about Yu Haoran? Even if he had inherited his parents' outstanding cultivation talent, even if he had mastered the top cultivation methods and martial arts secretly taught by Yu Hongji, he had just turned 16 and had only cultivated for a little more than a month. In just over a month of cultivation, he was able to easily defeat Wang Ru, who was a fourth-grade martial disciple. Everyone present immediately thought of Yu Hongji. They thought of the peerless genius who had suppressed countless geniuses and experts in Pingyang City. Xiao Ran. Compared to everyone's disbelief and shock, Yu Siki was more excited than shocked. Looking at Yu Haoran, who had easily defeated Wang Ru, she seemed to see the man who had once sheltered her from the wind and rain. Thinking of the man who had made her incomparably proud, she could not help but cry. Impossible! This is impossible. The heavy injury to her abdomen and the impact of the fall caused Wang Ru to fall into a trance. It wasn't until Yu Siki's excited shout that she came back to her senses. She then pointed at Yu Haoran and shouted. Yu Haoran was able to quickly find a flaw in the palm technique that filled the sky and accurately attacked the flaw. This showed that Yu Haoran had amazing eyesight. In just over a month, his cultivation had directly advanced to the peak of the third grade of martial disciple, revealing his astonishing cultivation talent. Yu Haoran's stunning performance had completely surpassed his father, Yu Hongji. How could Wang Ru, who had always looked down on him, accept this? Shaking his head, Yu Haoran ignored Wang Ru and walked in front of her. Yu Haoran, what do you want? Looking at Yu Haoran's indifferent expression and cold eyes, Wang Ru could not help but change her expression, because she did not believe that Yu Haoran would dare to kill her in front of everyone. After all, in Yu clan's rules, the punishment for killing without permission was very cruel. Not to mention, she was not an ordinary person. Not only was she the great elder's confidant, but she was also a deacon who controlled hundreds of servants. And Yu Haoran, not only was he a lowly servant who chopped firewood and carried water, but he was also a thorn in the great elder's side that he had always wanted to get rid of. Bitch, I just said that anyone who dares to humiliate my sister, I will scatter her soul and never let her reincarnate. Yu Haoran said with a cold expression. Yu Haoran, I'm the great elder's confidant and young Master Haoqing's nanny. If you kill me, the great elder and young Master Haoqing will definitely not let you go. You will not be able to live either. Yu Haoran's eyes surged with killing intent, letting Wang Ru know that he had already made up his mind to kill her. She quickly brought out her backer. She hoped that Yu Haoran would be afraid of the great elder's threat and let her live for the time being. As long as she could keep her life, she would immediately go to the great elder and ask him to send out stronger experts to get rid of Yu Haoran in advance. Otherwise, if Yu Haoran was allowed to continue growing, the Yu clan would return to the clan leader's side sooner or later. Wang Ru, even if I don't kill you, do you think the great elder will let me go? Yu Haoran asked rhetorically. His left fist, which was infused with origin energy, directly smashed into Wang Ru's temple. The fist, which was infused with origin energy, directly exploded Wang Ru's head. She didn't even have the chance to scream before her soul was completely scattered. Unafraid of the great elder's threat, after killing Wang Ru with a heavy punch, Yu Haoran ignored everyone's shock and fear. He turned around and walked in front of Yu Siki. With a gentle expression on his face, he bent down and helped her up. Xiao Ran, don't worry about me. Run away immediately, as far as you can. Enduring the pain from the whip on her back, Yu Siki struggled to break free from Yu Haoran's support and said anxiously. Yu Haoran was still young and didn't understand how terrifying the great elder's methods were. As the most talented genius of the younger generation in Pingyang City, Yu Siki had carried out many clan missions. She had seen the great elder's methods more than once. Even now, she still felt a lingering fear when she thought about it. Yu Haoran's killing of Wang Ru in front of everyone was not only challenging the Great Elder's authority, but also a declaration of war. Moreover, the shocking talent that he had just displayed would also make the Great Elder wary. Based on the Great Elder's character, he would definitely not let Yu Haoran off easily. Sister, don't worry about the Great Elder's threat. I have a way to deal with him. Turning his head to look outside the courtyard, Yu Haoran chuckled and then supported Yusiki's arm again. Seeing that Yu Haoran didn't listen to her advice, Yusiki was really anxious. She couldn't help but plead, "Xiao Ran, I beg you. Listen to my advice and leave the clan quickly. The farther the better. It would be best if you could leave the Emperor Qin Kingdom. Sister, please believe in me. Believe that since I was able to kill Wang Ru, I can also resolve the threat of the First Elder." Yu Haoran stopped smiling and solemnly promised. This, although she didn't want to believe Yu Haoran's promise, Yusiki couldn't help but look forward to seeing that he could surpass Wang Ru in cultivation and strength in just over a month without anyone noticing. She hoped that he could create another miracle. Moreover, if the Great Elder really attacked, with Yu Haoran's current strength and experience, it would be difficult for him to escape even if he wanted to. Seeing that his sister was no longer persuading him to leave the clan, Yu Haoran secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The experience of the next 100 years, the cultivation experience of the peak of the martial emperor realm, the strength of the Taishan Heart Sutra, and Victor, who had the ability to accelerate time, all of these made Yu Haoran very confident and fearless of any threat. But the only thing he was afraid of and couldn't refuse was Yusiki's tears. As long as she shed tears, even the firmest determination would be shaken. Next, he began to think about how to arrange his sister's life in the near future. Yusiki, who had just been whipped, not only needed a good rest, but also needed medicine to wipe the whip wounds on her back. As a man, it was really inconvenient for him to take care of her. Therefore, he raised his head and looked around to see who among the maidservants was suitable to take care of Yusiki. At this moment, he happened to see Lan Hui rushing in from outside the door. His eyes lit up. Chapter 9. Siki, are you all right? Seeing Yu Haoran standing there safe and sound, the expression of Lan Hui, who had rushed over, changed slightly. Immediately after, her face revealed a look of concern as she reached out to help Yusiki. Get lost. Just as Lan Hui was about to reach out to help Yusiki, the gloomy Yu Haoran suddenly kicked her in the chest, sending her flying a few meters before falling heavily on the ground. Although the kick just now did not use Yuan Li, the strength of the kick was at the early first grade of martial disciple due to the Yuan Li tempering of the body and the timing of the kick. Xiao Ran, what are you doing? Seeing Yu Haoran heavily injure Lan Hui without any explanation, Yusiki asked in displeasure. Lan Hui was not only gentle and understanding, she also liked to help others and had a very good relationship with her. The fact that she was able to survive more than a year as a servant from a young lady who had never done any chores was largely due to Lan Hui's contribution. Yusiki was grateful to her and respected her from the bottom of her heart. Therefore, seeing Yu Haoran heavily injuring Lan Hui, Yusiki was angry. At the same time, the surrounding servants who were familiar with Lan Hui were also dissatisfied. They were only afraid of Yu Haoran's ruthless killing of Wang Ru, so they did not dare to speak out. Only Wang Ru's subordinates had a slight change in expression as their eyes revealed a look of surprise. Lan Hui, you don't need to play dead. I did not use any Yuan Li in that kick. With your cultivation as a first-grade martial disciple, you will at most be injured. You will definitely not die. Not responding to Yusiki's angry question, Yu Haoran looked at the motionless Lan Hui and coldly mocked her. According to the Yu clan's rules, the servants and servants of the clan were not allowed to practice any mental cultivation or martial arts, even if it was the most common and trashiest mental cultivation or martial arts. The main reason for doing this was because they were worried that if some of the odd job workers and servants were gifted or coincidentally became strong, they would threaten the safety of the family. After all, the rules of the Yu clan were excessively harsh and cruel to the odd job workers and servants. Not only would these people not have any sense of belonging to the clan, they would even have a very deep hatred in their hearts. How could the upper echelons of the family raise a tiger and invite calamity? It was precisely because of this that Yusiki, who had also inherited her parents' outstanding talent and was only 17 years old, and her cultivation had already reached the peak of the 7th grade of martial disciple. She would not have her cultivation crippled the moment she was demoted to a servant. However, there were exceptions to everything. If you were able to catch the eye of a powerful figure in your family and become his trusted aide or lackey, then you would have a certain chance of being able to cultivate mental cultivation methods and martial skills. At first, Yuhaoran didn't think much about Lan Hui's sudden visit because he was worried about his sister's safety. He also didn't observe her carefully. However, just now, he saw that Lan Hui's steps were powerful and her breathing was steady. It was obvious that she had cultivated mental cultivation methods and martial skills. He immediately became suspicious in his heart. Although her strength had barely reached the middle stage of the 1st grade of martial disciple, with the status of a servant being able to cultivate mental cultivation methods and martial skills, there was no need to think too much about it. She must have secretly relied on Wang Ru or even the Great Elder's faction. At the same time, he also realized something. The reason why Lan Hui went to inform him that his sister was being punished was not because she was worried about his sister's safety, but because she wanted to lure him into the trap and make him violate the clan's rules in order to curry favor with Wang Ru. If he was accidentally killed by Wang Ru today, not only would Wang Ru receive a great reward from the Great Elder, but Lan Hui would also receive a lot of benefits. At the very least, her status as a servant would be improved. Middle stage of the 1st grade of martial disciple. Not only was Yusiki not stupid, but she was also very smart. When Yuhaoran mentioned Lan Hui's hidden strength, she realized that her sister, who usually treated her extremely well, probably had ulterior motives. Lan Hui, you and I are strangers from now on. Coldly looking at Lan Hui, Yusiki said indifferently. When Yuhaoran pointed out Lan Hui's cultivation and Yusiki's attitude, the servant girls who were a little slow to react also gradually came back to their senses. When they thought of the daily life they lived together, worked together, and endured Wang Ru's insults and punishments together, Lan Hui had always appeared weak and gentle, never revealing her cultivation. When the servant girls were shocked by her forbearance, they suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. Living together with such a scheming woman, they were lucky to be able to live until now. Therefore, the servant girls who originally wanted to go forward and help her immediately retreated. Seeing Yuhaoran expose her disguise, Lan Hui knew that she could not continue pretending, so she could only open her eyes and stand up. Although Yuhaoran did not use his elemental energy just now, she was still attacked in a situation where she was unprepared. This caused her to be severely injured. At least for a short period of time, she could not use her elemental energy. At the same time, Yuhaoran had just pointed out that he was hiding his cultivation, which also caused her plan to secretly monitor everyone to fail. Therefore, after standing up, Lan Hui looked at Yuhaoran with eyes full of anger and hatred. Lan Hui, according to what you did earlier, I should have taken your life. However, considering how much you've taken care of my elder sister, and that it was precisely because of your malicious intentions that I was able to save my elder sister in time, I'll temporarily spare your life today. Yuhaoran didn't take Lan Hui's gnashing of teeth to heart at all. A servant like Lan Hui, who had neither talent nor backbone, did not possess any danger at all, so there was no need to take her hatred to heart. You. After punishing Lan Hui, Yuhaoran suddenly had an idea that could allow his sister to recuperate in peace. Pointing at Wang Ru's subordinates, Yuhaoran ordered domineeringly, "The 3 of you, help me tidy up Wang Ru's room, then arrange for my sister to recuperate in peace. At the same time, the 3 of you will be responsible for taking care of my sister during this time." The reason why he chose Wang Ru's 3 subordinates to take care of his sister, other than the fact that they were all women and it was convenient for them to take care of Yusiki, was also because they would definitely report the matter of him killing Wang Ru to Great Elder and Yuhanyang. However, Great Elder and Yuhanyang had already secretly left the clan, so they could only look for Yu Haoqing. With Yu Haoqing's intention to obtain his sister, not only would he not allow them to continue hurting his sister, but he would also instruct them to take good care of his sister and even take out the best healing elixirs to treat her. Seeing that Yu Haoran actually ordered Wang Ru's subordinates to take care of her, Yusiki hurriedly shook her head and refused. Xiaoran, I don't need anyone to take care of me. Sister, I killed Wang Ru and showed that my cultivation talent is not inferior to father's, which will definitely arouse Great Elder's fear. In order to be able to withstand their revenge, I need to be prepared in advance, so I definitely won't be able to take care of you for a period of time. Yu Haoran was not surprised by his sister's refusal at all, and he also knew that she disliked Wang Ru and her subordinates, so he patiently persuaded her. Unless you are willing to see me being assassinated by Great Elder and the others. Okay, I'll listen to your arrangement. What Yu Haoran said just now was exactly what she was worried about, so she did not continue to refuse and listen to Yu Haoran's arrangement with peace of mind. After settling Yusiki properly, Yu Haoran pretended to leave and then quietly hid in a secluded place and then waited quietly. Things were just as he had guessed. After Wang Ru's 3 subordinates arranged for Yusiki to stay, one of them quietly left the servants' area. More than an hour later, Yu Haoqing, with an anxious face, rushed in with a female doctor. Since his sister was no longer in danger, and there was a female doctor taking care of her, Yu Haoran was relieved. Chapter 10. Inside the Victor. After returning to the Victor, Yu Haoran sat down cross-legged and calmed himself. If it weren't for Lan Hui's sudden visit that interrupted his breakthrough, he would have already broken through to the 4th grade of martial disciple and completed his goal. Now that Wang Ru, who could threaten Yusiki for the time being, had been killed, and Lan Hui, who harbored evil intentions, had been seen through and expelled, Yu Haoran didn't need to worry about her safety for the time being. Therefore, he decided to continue with the interrupted breakthrough. The 3rd meridian, the Yinwei meridian, had already been opened. All he needed to do now was to connect the 3 open meridians together and smoothly break through to the 4th grade of martial disciple. His experience in cultivation from his previous life allowed him to quickly immerse himself in the process of increasing his cultivation. The powerful Great Mystery Heart Sutra allowed the 3 open meridians to quickly connect them together. The Victor was filled with spiritual energy, which allowed the Yuan Li in his body to continuously increase and accelerate the advancement of his cultivation. 3 hours later, a powerful aura quickly rose from his body. He easily broke through the peak of the 3rd grade of martial disciple and smoothly entered the early 4th grade of martial disciple. After consolidating his cultivation, Yu Haoran stood up and left the Victor. Yu Haoran had his own considerations and plans as to why he didn't continue to use the Victor's ability to accelerate time to increase his cultivation. First of all, after his rebirth, his cultivation had increased too quickly. Although the experience of being a peak martial emperor, the mental state that had been tempered for 100 years in his previous life, and the great power of the Supreme Mystery Heart Sutra would not cause him to have an unstable foundation, it would still affect the accumulation of potential. Potential was the same as vitality. It was the foundation that determined whether a martial artist could advance quickly, and also one of the keys to their future achievements. Being able to retain the memories of his previous life, return to 100 years ago, and have the ability to accelerate time, his current goal wasn't just a return to the peak of Martial King, nor was it simply to sense the power of law and advance to the Martial King realm. Emperor Wu was his ultimate goal. He even wanted to break through to the legendary immortal martial god realm. Secondly, he needed to snatch a spiritual medicine that was about to be born. According to the memories of his previous life, he vaguely remembered that in the dense forest outside Pingyang City, there was a spirit herb that was about to mature. It could nourish one's vitality, increase one's potential, and increase one's cultivation. In order to deal with Yu Haoqing's predicament, he used 3 months of his life force in exchange for 3 months of cultivation time with Thaling. 3 months' worth of life force, considering his age, wouldn't affect his lifespan much. However, it would weaken his potential slightly. At the same time, It was a thorn in his heart that was difficult to overcome. Therefore, he was anxious to recover the life force that Michu had lost. He was anxious to remove the thorn in his heart. The spiritual medicine that was about to be born could not only replenish his lost vitality, but it could also strengthen his physical body and increase his potential. More importantly, snatching away the spirit herb that was about to be born in advance could deal a fatal blow to his enemy in his previous life. Not only would his enemy not be able to increase his potential and cultivation level, but he would also not be able to stand out in the sex selection competition a month later and become a popular figure in Pingyang City. After leaving the victor, Yu Haoran planned to take a look at Yusiki. Although it had only been half an hour since he left Yusiki's place of recuperation, he couldn't be at ease if he didn't take a look before leaving the family. However, just as he opened the door, he was surprised to see someone standing outside. It was a middle-aged man who was about 40 years old. He wore a brocade robe and had a gloomy expression on his face. "He Jiqiang, you're later than I expected." Seeing the person standing outside the door, Yu Haoran wasn't surprised at all. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he teased in a relaxed tone. "He Jiqiang, the second deputy chief of the Yu family's servant district. His status and power were higher than Wang Ru's. He was also the enemy who had attacked him previously and almost killed him. After killing Wang Ru, Yu Haoran knew that He Jiqiang would definitely come looking for him. According to the Great Elder's original arrangement, Wang Ru was responsible for monitoring Yusiki, while He Jiqiang was responsible for monitoring him. Back then, the reason why He Jiqiang attacked him was only because he made a mistake. The main reason was that He Jiqiang had discovered that he was secretly cultivating. Moreover, his cultivation had already entered the early first grade of martial disciple. He already had the potential to threaten the Great Elder and the others. Now, not only did he survive the injury caused by He Jiqiang's palm, he also broke through to the fourth grade of martial disciple and killed Wang Ru in front of everyone. To He Jiqiang, this wasn't just a dereliction of duty. It was a very serious crime. With his vengeful personality, it would be strange if he didn't come looking for him. "Brat, you're quite ruthless. In order to hide your true cultivation, you actually braced yourself and took a palm strike with 50% of my strength." Yu Haoran's relaxed and teasing tone immediately made He Jiqiang feel anger burning in his heart. Just as Yu Haoran had speculated, He Jiqiang's main responsibility was to monitor Yu Haoran. As long as he could ensure that Yu Haoran couldn't grow up and affect the Great Elder's plan, it would be fine. When the Great Elder completely dealt with the Ninth Elder and those disloyal clansmen, he would be able to truly control the clan. Not only would it be the time of Yu Haoran's death, but it would also be the time of He Jiqiang's promotion. But now, under his surveillance, Yu Haoran not only secretly cultivated, but also used only a little more than a month's time to reach the level where he could easily kill Wang Ru, showing an amazing talent for cultivation. If the Great Elder knew about this, not to mention being promoted to the position of Great Elder, he was afraid that even his current position as Deputy Great Elder would be difficult to keep. He might even lose his life. Therefore, in order to protect his life and status, he had to immediately take action. Even if it meant violating the clan's rules and offending the Ninth Elder, he didn't hesitate. "Ha!" Yu Haoran chuckled and sneered with a disdainful expression. "TSK, with your strength, not to mention one palm, even 10 or 100 palms wouldn't be able to hurt me. Yu Haoran. Fine, you're tough." He Jiqiang gritted his teeth and said. Then his body moved slightly and quickly approached like a gust of wind. At the same time, he used his most prized lotus palm technique. Using his strongest strength and means at the beginning was enough to show how strong He Jiqiang's killing intent was. It also showed that he had a detailed understanding of Yu Haoran's strength before he came. Flower blooms, flower withers. The faintly discernible palm technique gave people a feeling of being both real and illusory. But to Yu Haoran, He Jiqiang's lotus palm technique was not much different from Wang Ru's lotus palm technique. It was still full of flaws. Turning his head to look at the dark corner, Yu Haoran smiled knowingly. Then, The fist technique that contained elemental energy directly blasted into the seemingly illusory palm technique. With a bang, the fist that contained elemental energy directly broke through the illusory palm technique and easily shook off He Jiqiang's palm. At the same time, he closed in and directly punched He Jiqiang's lower forehead. With a look of disbelief, He Jiqiang flew into the air like Wang Ru and fell heavily to the ground. His body moved slightly, and his legs that were infused with elemental energy quickly appeared beside He Jiqiang. He raised his head and directly stepped on He Jiqiang's head with his left leg. Chapter 11. Have mercy. Just as Yu Haoran's left foot was about to crush He Jiqiang's head and take his life, a hurried voice called out to stop him. Then, an ordinary-looking young man dressed in black walked out from the shadows. He was about 30 years old and had a restrained aura. Retracting his left foot and placing his hands behind his back, Yu Haoran looked coldly at the other party. Your subordinate, Lin Yun, greets the young clan leader. The man in black walked up to Yu Haoran and bowed with a very respectful expression. Don't. I'm just a handyman who carries water and cleaves materials. I can't even eat 3 meals a day. I'm neither the successor of the family nor the young patriarch you speak of. I can't accept such a great bow from you. Although the other party's attitude was very respectful, Yu Haoran didn't give him a good look. His tone was very cold. In your subordinate's eyes, the young patriarch will always be the successor of the Yu family. Yu Haoran's cold and distant attitude didn't displease Lin Yun in the slightest. His attitude was still very respectful. Yu Haoran didn't say anything in response. He just asked coldly, "All right, there's no need for pleasantries. Now, you need to give me a reason not to kill He Jiqiang." Family rules. Lin Yun replied as he shot out a blast of qi and directly stunned He Jiqiang, who was about to get up. Then, he asked in return, "Young patriarch, I'm sure you can guess where I'm from. Someone from the disciplinary hall, the confidant of the 9th elder." Yu Haoran replied with a nod. Young patriarch guessed correctly. Your subordinate is indeed from the disciplinary hall, but I'm not the confidant of the 9th elder. Lin Yun continued humbly. Your subordinate didn't expect the young patriarch's talent to be so strong and your strength to rise so quickly. When you killed Wang Ru, your subordinate couldn't stop you in time. Actually, there was one thing that Lin Yun didn't say, and that was that Yu Haoran's schemes were so deep and his methods of concealment were so well hidden that he didn't notice Yu Haoran's secret cultivation from beginning to end. Therefore, young clan leader's killing of Wang Ru has broken the clan's rules. This subordinate has to bear most of the responsibility. At the same time, at that time, you were in a hurry to save elder sister and were willing to do so. Therefore, the 9th elder could persuade the other elders to exempt you from the responsibility. At this point, Lin Yun pointed at the unconscious He Jiqiang and continued. Young clan leader, if you kill He Jiqiang now, it would be considered as intentional murder. Moreover, it would be going against your superiors and killing your superior. Even if the 9th elder wants to protect you, I'm afraid it would be difficult to convince the masses. Yu Haoran couldn't help but sneer at Lin Yun's explanation. Lin Yun, then let me ask you. If my strength was insufficient and I was defeated and killed by Wang Ru or He Jiqiang, would you have intervened? Haha, young clan leader. Ever since you were expelled from the clan and demoted to a servant, the first elder's people have secretly attacked you dozens of times. Do you really think that you're lucky to be alive and well now? Lin Yun asked with a chuckle, not answering Yu Haoran's question directly. That's right. Yu Haoran, am able to live until now because of the 9th elder's secret protection. Otherwise, I wouldn't have shown mercy just now. Yu Haoran nodded, accepting the other party's secret protection. In fact, when Yu Haoran had reached the peak of martial master in his previous life and returned to the Yu clan, he had personally heard from the first elder and the others that the 9th elder had secretly protected him. He also knew that it was the 9th elder's secret help that allowed him to escape the clan alive and successfully pass the sect selection competition to enter the sect. He had always been grateful for the 9th elder's secret protection and help. This was also the reason why he was willing to let most of the clan members go. However, the only thing that made him unhappy was that when Yusiki was forced to commit suicide by that bastard Yuhouching, not only did he not help, he even looked on coldly from the sidelines. This was also one of the reasons why he was unwilling to stay in the Yu clan and help the Yu clan become stronger. It was precisely because of this knot in his heart that Yu Haoran's attitude towards Lin Yun was so cold in the beginning. Lin Yun, today I can temporarily let he Jiqiang off because of you and the ninth elder. However, this is the only exception. If you stop me in the future, then don't blame me, Yu Haoran, for falling out with you. After leaving behind these threatening words, Yu Haoran directly left the courtyard and walked towards the Yu clan residence. Looking at the departing Yu Haoran, Lin Yun's face revealed a trace of worry as he carefully pondered over the words he had just left. As the person who had been secretly sent by the ninth elder to protect Yu Haoran and his sister, he knew what kind of life they had been through over the past year. He had also witnessed with his own eyes what kind of oppression and humiliation they had suffered. He also knew how much resentment and hatred they had accumulated in their hearts. Originally, according to his thinking, since he had already taken the risk of offending the first elder by secretly protecting Yu Haoran and his sister, why not help them more? If he did this, when Yu Haoran really grew up and regained the power of the clan, those who had helped him in the past would be considered meritorious subjects. At that time, whether it was their status, reputation, or their treatment, they would all be greatly improved. Unfortunately, the order given by the ninth elder was only to ensure that Yu Haoran would not die. As for the humiliation and torture they had suffered, he was not allowed to help. Now, Yu Haoran was able to use a short period of more than a month to reach the 4th grade of martial disciple under his nose. Furthermore, he was able to easily defeat Wang Ru and He Jiqiang, who were completely superior to him in terms of cultivation. This was enough to prove that his talent was not inferior to those top geniuses of the sections. His scheming was not inferior to those old foxes in the clan. Talent was the foundation that determined whether a person was strong or not, and scheming was the means that determined whether a person was strong or not. Yu Haoran's talent and scheming were enough to guarantee that he would be able to grow up in the future and surpass his father, becoming the first expert of the Yu clan to break through to the martial ancestor realm. Thinking of this, Lin Yun decided to properly persuade the ninth elder to find a way to quickly curry favor with Yu Haoran. It would be best if he could win Yu Haoran's favor. Chapter 12. Northeast of Pingyang City, there was a primitive forest that covered millions of acres. In the primitive forest, ancient trees towered into the sky and wild beasts roamed freely. There were also some mutated beasts that had cultivated successfully. Just like humans, wild beasts were also creatures that could cultivate. Through cultivation, they could evolve into stronger mutated beasts. According to their strength, mutated beasts were divided into 10 levels, 9 ranks, and 90 ranks. Among them, level 10 mutated beasts were equivalent to martial artists in the martial disciple realm. Level 9 mutated beasts were equivalent to martial artists in the martial warrior realm. Level 8 mutated beasts were equivalent to martial artists in the martial master realm, and so on. Mutated beasts devoured the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to nourish themselves. Their flesh and blood contained large amounts of spiritual energy. If one could consume the flesh and blood of mutated beasts for a long period of time, not only could it increase one's strength, but could also continuously improve one's physique and enhance one's potential. Some special mutated beasts could even increase a martial artist's soul power. However, due to the special body structure of mutated beasts, they were far stronger than humans in terms of strength and toughness of their flesh. At the same level, human martial artists were far from being a match for mutated beasts. Fortunately, most of the mutated beasts in the primitive forest were ordinary level 10 breeds. Not only were their strength average, but they were mostly distributed in the periphery of the forest. A few level 9 mutated beasts were entrenched in the depths of the forest and rarely appeared. It was just right for the young martial artists of Pingyang City to train. Therefore, This primitive forest was also designated as a training ground by the three major clans of Pingyang City and the city lord's residence. It was only for the young martial artists of Pingyang City to train. And this primitive forest was the destination of Yu Haoran's trip. After leaving the Yu clan, Yu Haoran didn't choose to walk on the main road. Instead, he chose some muddy and strange paths. The reason why he didn't walk on the main road was because he didn't want to meet any familiar faces for the time being. Before his parents were killed, as the young clan leader of the Yu clan, he often attended some important events. Basically, all the big and small forces in Pingyang City knew him. He didn't want to meet any familiar faces, not because he was afraid of them, but because he didn't want them to affect his next move. After all, he used his parents' prestige and deterrence to do many evil things. Those people didn't dare to find trouble with him because of his parents' prestige. But now, the primitive jungle was about 50 kilometers away from Pingyang City. With the support of his elemental energy, Yu Haoran only spent 3 hours to reach the primitive jungle. Isn't this the young master of the Yu clan, Yu Haoran? Just as Yu Haoran arrived at the primitive jungle, before he could adjust his breathing and observe the situation in front of the jungle, he suddenly heard a surprised voice. Yu Haoran couldn't help but frown when he turned around to look. This was because the person who had exclaimed earlier was a direct descendant of the Wu clan, one of the three major clans in Pingyang City. The three major clans in Pingyang City were the Yu clan, the Chung clan, and the Wu clan. The inheritance of the three great clans was around 500 years, and there was not much difference in strength between them. No one could completely suppress the other. However, this situation of being evenly matched was suddenly broken 5 years ago. The reason for this was the appearance of a peerless genius in the Yu clan, Yu Hongji. Yu Hongji was a very special person in the Yu clan. Before he came of age, he was just an ordinary direct descendant of the clan. Even after he came of age, his performance was not very outstanding and could only be considered average. However, 19 years ago, when he was 18 years old, he suddenly made a decision that was out of everyone's expectations, and that was to leave the family to travel. Moreover, he left for 14 years, during which there was no news of him at all. Just when everyone thought that he had died outside, he suddenly appeared in the Yu clan. Not only did he reach the peak of a 7th grade martial master, but he also brought his wife and children back. Although the peak of a 7th grade martial master was not the best in Pingyang City, he had mastered a secret technique that could raise his strength by 3 to 5 levels, as well as a few martial arts techniques that could allow him to fight above his level. With the help of the secret technique and martial arts techniques, he consecutively defeated the clan leaders of the three major clans and forced the clan leader of the Yu clan to give up his position. Under his leadership, the Yu clan used less than a year to completely suppress the other two major clans, causing the Yu clan's territory to expand rapidly. If not for the city lord's mansion's secret warnings and obstructions, he would have exterminated the Chung and Wu clans. Originally, with Yu Hongji, the #1 expert in Pingyang City, the Chung and Wu clans would not be able to raise their heads in the next few hundred years unless a genius similar to Yu Hongji appeared in their clans. However, under Yu Hongji's strong suppression, even if such a genius appeared, it would be difficult for him to grow. If this situation continued for 100 years, there was no need for Yu Hongji to personally take action. The Wu and Chung clans, whose territories were constantly shrinking and their profits were constantly decreasing, would almost automatically perish. However, in that inexplicable secret battle a year ago, not only did the direct descendants of the Yu clan suffer heavy losses, but even the #1 expert of the Yu clan, Yu Hongji, died in an accident. This caused the Yu clan's strength to return to 5 years ago. 5 years. In 5 years, the Wu and Chung clans were too severely suppressed by Yu Hongji. After they recovered, they began to madly retaliate against the Yu clan. Fortunately, Yu Hongji had earned enough wealth and resources for the Yu clan during his 5 years in power. This also allowed the Yu clan's overall strength to increase by a lot. Facing the alliance of the two great clans, the Yu clan, which had shrunk a part of their battle line, was not at a disadvantage. thinking of the hatred his father had formed with the two great clans for the sake of the clan's interests. Thinking of the situation he encountered after his father's tragic death, Yu Haoran could not help but sigh. Then, he raised his head and looked at the Wu clan disciple in front of him. His eyes revealed a trace of a complicated expression. The young man in front of him was called Wu Jingjun. In the younger generation of the Wu clan, his talent and strength were ranked 10th among the direct descendants. Originally, Yu Haoran should not have known Wu Zhijun, who was ranked at the bottom and did not have a prominent reputation. However, Wu Zhengjun had a special constitution. In the sex selection competition a month later, he surpassed Wu Zhenghao, who was ranked first in the Wu clan. He was fancied by the first-rate Iron Blood sect and was directly accepted as an inner disciple. Since then, his reputation had spread greatly. It was precisely because of that sex selection competition that he knew of Wu Zhengjun. "What's the matter?" Yu Haoran asked in a complicated tone as he secretly mobilized 50% of his elemental energy. He mobilized 50% of his elemental energy because he knew that Wu Zhengjun would definitely not let him off easily. Wu Zhengjun would definitely mistakenly think that Wu Zhengjun's strength was far superior to his and humiliate him. After all, the Wu and Cheng clans had been humiliated and suppressed for 5 years entirely because of his father. Now that his father was dead, as a son, he would definitely become the target of the Cheng and Wu clans' revenge. Chapter 13. Outside the forest. Of course there is. Wu Jingjun said proudly with his fingers interlocked and his arms swinging up and down. As a talented direct descendant of the Wu clan, Wu Jingjun deeply felt the pressure that Yu Hongji brought to the clan. He also personally experienced the humiliation that the Yu clan brought to them. Ever since Yu Hongji's accidental death, the mountain that had been weighing on their heads had disappeared. For the younger generation of the Cheng clan and Wu clan, their greatest wish was to defeat Yu Haoran and take revenge on Yu Hongji for the humiliation and depression they felt when they were suppressed by him. Unfortunately, when they wanted to find Yu Haoran for revenge, they found out that he had been banished from the clan by the Great Elder and demoted to a servant. Thus, they lost the chance to take revenge. Thinking of the outside world's evaluation of the Yu clan's Grand Elder, Wu Zhengjun originally thought that he would never be able to see Yu Haoran again in this lifetime. But what he didn't expect was that in order to prepare for the sect's disciple selection competition a month later, he would unexpectedly encounter Yu Haoran while adventuring alone in the primitive jungle. Although he knew very well that Yu Haoran, who was demoted to a servant, was suppressed by the Great Elder and others, and was perhaps an ordinary person who had never cultivated before. With his cultivation as a peak 5th grade martial disciple, it was beneath his dignity to humiliate an ordinary person. However, the accumulated humiliation in his heart made him unable to control the urge to take revenge. Yu Haoran, as the saying goes, a tiger father will not beget a dog son. Your father was the #1 genius of Pingyang City and was also the #1 expert of Pingyang City. As his son, your talent and strength should not be too bad. Today, I, Wu Zhengjun, as a member of the younger generation of the Wu clan, formally challenge you, Yu Haoran. I wonder if you have the guts to accept? Wu Zhengjun said provocatively. Make your move. Since he could not avoid it, he could only face it calmly. Yu Haoran said with an indifferent expression. However, he would control his strength and limits and try not to hurt Wu Zhengjun, one of his few good friends in his previous life. Oh, good, you have guts. Originally, Wu Zhengjun thought that Yu Haoran would refuse. He had already planned to use humiliation to force Yu Haoran to agree to the challenge. However, Yu Haoran's indifference surprised him, and it took him a while to react. Subsequently, he mobilized 30% of his essence energy and prepared to make a move. He mobilized 30% of his origin power because he only wanted to teach Yu Haoran a lesson and release the humiliation and depression that had accumulated in his heart. He didn't want to heavily injure him, let alone take his life. After everything was ready, the cautious Wu Jingjun did not act rashly. Instead, he stared closely at Yu Haoran, looking for his flaws and the best time to strike. However, after more than a minute of observation, he found that Yu Haoran did not have a single flaw on his body, which made him question himself. Someone who could not be seen through by him had either reached a very high level of cultivation or was an expert with rich battle experience who knew how to hide his flaws. However, considering Yu Haoran's age and his current awkward situation, Wu Jingjun concluded that his cultivation was at most at the peak of first-grade martial disciple, and he was not an expert who had experienced hundreds of battles. To be able to hide his flaws, it must be a secret technique left behind by his father, Yu Hongji. When he had just returned to Pingyang City, his cultivation was only at the peak of 8th-grade martial master, but he relied on a secret technique that could increase his strength to defeat the Pingyang City's mayor, who was at the peak of 9th-grade martial master. Wu Zhengjun subconsciously increased the 30% of his origin power that he had mobilized by another 30%. Just as he secretly increased his origin power by 30%, Yu Haoran, who was already prepared, could not help but frown and turn his head to look behind him. After his rebirth, although he had lost the power of a peak martial king and his soul, he still had the instincts of a martial king. Just a moment ago, he vaguely felt a trace of danger approaching and instinctively turned his head to look. Yu Haoran unexpectedly turned his head to look, causing Yu Haoran, who was about to make a move, to be stunned. He then looked in front of him, but there was nothing abnormal in front of him. This made him suspect whether Yu Haoran's turn was a trap. Yu Haoran, what is the meaning of this? Are you going to make a move or not? Wu Jingjun asked unhappily. Wait a moment. Without turning his head, Yu Haoran signaled. A minute later, just as Wu Jingjun was getting impatient and was about to make a move, a group of people suddenly walked out from behind Yu Haoran. Cheng Zhangyu. After seeing the handsome and extraordinary young man in the group, Wu Jingjun could not help but exclaim. Following Wu Jingjun's exclamation, Yu Haoran's furrowed brows also relaxed with the appearance of the group of people. At the same time, he understood why he felt the danger approaching. Cheng Zhangyu, the strongest peerless genius of the Cheng clan's younger generation. His cultivation talent was not inferior to Yu Siki's before she was crippled. Together with the Yu clan's Yu Haoqing and the Wu clan's Wu Jianghao, they were known as the three great young masters of Pingyang City. A year ago, Cheng Zhangyu's cultivation had already reached the peak of the 6th-grade martial disciple. Now a year had passed. With his outstanding talent, tenacity, and the Cheng clan's meticulous cultivation, Cheng Zhangyu's cultivation had probably advanced to the peak of the 8th-grade martial disciple. It was even possible for him to open the last 2 meridians and advance to the 9th-grade martial disciple. With his current cultivation of the 4th-grade martial disciple, it would be difficult for him to overcome the gap of 5 grades to defeat Cheng Zhangyu, unless he was willing to overdraft a part of his potential and use a secret method to increase his strength. Hey, isn't this the young master of the Yu clan, Yu Haoran? Just as Yu Haoran noticed Cheng Zhangyu and the others, Cheng Zhangyu and the others also noticed him. When they saw Yu Haoran, who had been expelled from the Yu clan and demoted to a handyman, suddenly appear outside the primitive jungle, one of the Cheng clan's disciples beside Cheng Zhangyu exclaimed. Glancing at Yu Haoran from head to toe, Cheng Zhangyu's eyes flashed with a trace of disdain. After leaving the word trash, he directly walked past Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun, and then walked towards the primitive jungle. The other Cheng clan's disciples also looked at Yu Haoran with disdain, and then followed closely behind. Facing Cheng Zhangyu's contempt, Yu Haoran's expression was calm, and there was not the slightest fluctuation in his heart. He only coldly looked at the Cheng clan's disciples who were constantly approaching the primitive jungle. Just as Cheng Zhangyu walked to the edge of the primitive jungle and was about to step into the jungle, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to a Cheng clan's disciple whose cultivation had reached the peak of the 5th-grade martial disciple. Cheng Li, go teach that trash a lesson. Let him know that the current Yu clan is no longer the Yu clan of a year ago. In the future, when he sees our Cheng clan's disciples, his attitude should be a bit more respectful. After giving the order, Cheng Zhangyu made a special gesture and then stepped into the jungle. Brother Cheng Li, when you make a move, pay attention to propriety. You must not play the young master of the Yu clan to death. That's right, cousin Cheng Li. After all, he is the young master of the Yu clan. His status is honorable. Just as Cheng Zhongyu stepped into the jungle, the other Cheng clan's disciples seemed to be taking care of him, but in fact, they were mocking him. Chapter 14. Outside the forest. Among the three major clans of Pingyang City, the Yu clan was the strongest, the Cheng clan was the second, and the Wu clan was the weakest. It was precisely because of the Cheng clan's strength that Yu Hongji had dealt with them the most and suppressed them the most. After Yu Hongji's accidental death, the Cheng clan's revenge on the Yu clan was also the fiercest. They understood the Yu clan the best. They knew what Yu Haoran had experienced in the Yu clan in the past year, and they also knew about Yu Haoran's current situation. Leaving behind Cheng Li, who was at the peak of the 5th grade martial disciple, to teach Yu Haoran a lesson was only convenient. Cheng Zhongyu's main target was Wu Jingjun. After all, Yu Hongji's accidental death had equalized the strength of the three major clans. The relationship between the Cheng clan and the Wu clan had also gradually changed from an inseparable alliance a year ago. Recently, there had been several bloody conflicts because of some resources. This was also the reason why Cheng Zhongyu made a special gesture when he entered the forest. Wu Zhengjun, can we postpone the challenge between us for a while? Cheng Zhongyu and the rest's contempt did not make Yu Haoran too angry. This was because he had suffered so much contempt and humiliation in his previous life. This kind of contempt was nothing. However, not being angry did not mean that he did not care. As for Wu Zhengjun, Cheng Zhongyu and the rest's arrogant attitude made him feel endless humiliation. Although his talent was not as outstanding as Cheng Zhongyu's, and his strength was not as strong as Cheng Zhongyu's, no matter what, he was still a genius among the direct descendants of the Wu clan. His status and position were not inferior to Cheng Zhongyu's, and he deserved to be respected. At the same time, Yu Haoran's temperament was as steady as Mount Tai, which made Wu Jingjun somewhat unable to figure out Yu Haoran's real trump card. Since Cheng Li was going to test him, how could he not agree? Therefore, Wu Jun very readily agreed. Okay. Raging Bull Charge. After obtaining Wu Zhengjuan's agreement, Yu Haoran directly mobilized 80% of the essence energy within his Dantian and combined it with the Reckless Bull Fist Art's Reckless Bull Charge. He took the lead to charge towards Cheng Li. 4th grade martial disciple. Cheng Li couldn't help but exclaim when he saw that Yu Haoran had directly burst out with the cultivation of a 4th grade martial disciple. According to the information from the spies of the Cheng clan and the Yu clan, Yu Haoran, who had been demoted to an errand boy, had no time or opportunity to cultivate under the suppression of the first elder and the others. He was still an ordinary person. Even if the spy couldn't monitor Yu Haoran at all times due to his identity and position, allowing him to cultivate in secret, it would still be difficult for him to break through to the 1st grade of martial disciple in less than a month's time. However, Yu Haoran's current cultivation had reached the 4th grade of martial disciple. It was obvious that he had mastered an extraordinary set of martial skills. This caused Cheng Li, who originally had a playful attitude, to suddenly have a murderous intent. After all, Yu Haoran was able to reach the 4th grade of martial disciple in just a month's time. The talent that he had displayed was too monstrous. If he didn't take advantage of this opportunity to eliminate Yu Haoran and let him continue to grow, in a few years, another Yu Hongji would appear in the Yu clan. No, not another Yu Haoran, but one that was even more terrifying and valiant than Yu Hongji. Even the mayor's mansion might not be able to suppress this peerless expert. With a murderous intent, Cheng Li not only directly burst out with all his strength, but also used the Cheng clan's most sinister and difficult to guard against, the sneaky snake hand. After using the sneaky snake hand, Cheng Li's entire body seemed to have softened, and his body showed a strange distortion. Seeing Cheng Li use the sneaky snake hand, the spectating Wu Jun's face changed, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. He didn't expect that the Cheng clan's direct descendant, who was about the same age as him, would actually be able to cultivate the sneaky snake hand. Moreover, From the softness of his opponent's body, he could see that his opponent's mastery of the sneaky snake hand had reached a certain level. At the very least, he had stepped into the realm of small success. With the same cultivation, Wu Zhengjun knew that he was not Cheng Li's opponent. At the same time, he gradually came to his senses. Cheng Zhangyu had specifically left Cheng Li behind to deal with him. Yu Haoran was only doing it in passing. After all, before Yu Haoran's cultivation erupted, his aura and experience gave people the feeling of an ordinary person. There was no need for Cheng Li, a peak 5th grade martial disciple, to personally make a move. Thinking of this, Wu Zhengjun suddenly had the intention to retreat. Cheng Li's body twisted 90 degrees and easily shot through the fist technique formed by the raging bull rush. At the same time, his right hand was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue, directly stabbing towards Yu Haoran's neck. With the help of momentum formed by the raging bull rush, Yu Haoran's neck lowered and dodged Cheng Li's snake hand. Then, he directly turned 180 degrees, and his whole body was in a posture like he was leaning up. Raging bull facing the sky. Clenching his left hand, he used the raging bull fist technique's raging bull facing the sky, aiming straight for Cheng Li's chest. Viper tail swing. Yu Haoran's defense and counterattack greatly exceeded Cheng Li's expectations. Fortunately, his rich combat experience allowed him to instinctively avoid Yu Haoran's attack and take advantage of the opportunity to attack his opponent's vital points. Cheng Li's reaction and counterattack also made Yu Haoran feel a little surprised, because he didn't expect that Cheng Li, who usually didn't show off, would have such a high combat awareness. Although it was unexpected, Yu Haoran took advantage of the moment when his body landed on the ground to roll over and flip over, dodging his opponent's viper tail swing. At the same time, taking advantage of the fact that Cheng Li's old strength was weak and his new strength had not yet recovered, he used the raging bull roar directly on his opponent's left shoulder. Unfortunately, his opponent's shadow snake hand not only allowed his attacks to be strange and varied, but also his body's flexibility was extremely strong. A heavy punch equivalent to a peak 5th grade martial disciple only caused a slight injury to his opponent. Although it was a pity, Yu Haoran didn't care, because through the exchange just now, he discovered that his understanding of the raging bull fist technique from his previous life was becoming deeper and deeper. As long as he continued to exchange blows, he believed that at most a month's time, he would be able to completely restore his understanding of the raging bull fist technique from his previous life. As long as he could restore the raging bull fist technique to the realm of large success and complete the initial foundation of his body, he would be able to cultivate several powerful martial skills and further increase his combat strength. Rubbing his somewhat painful shoulder, Cheng Li looked at Yu Haoran with a dignified expression, a trace of fear flashing in his eyes. Through the exchange just now, he knew that although Yu Haoran's cultivation was not as high as his, the quality of his opponent's Yuan Li, battle awareness, and understanding of martial skills were far superior to his own. Chapter 15. Outside the primitive forest, reckless bulls stirring the moon. The familiar feeling that kept surging in his heart made Yu Haoran want to use martial techniques to his heart's content. He wanted to quickly recover his understanding of the reckless bull fist technique from his previous life, and he wanted to quickly practice those powerful martial techniques. Therefore, he did not delay and continued to use the other moves of the reckless bull fist technique. Unfortunately, although Cheng Li was not seriously injured by that punch, it still affected his following performance. Whether it was dodging or counterattacking, they were not as fast and powerful as before, so he quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. After exchanging a few blows, Yu Haoran's originally excited expression gradually calmed down. When he felt that his opponent could no longer let him deepen his understanding of the reckless bull fist technique, he gave up on the idea of sparring with him. Taking advantage of one of Cheng Li's flaws, Lu Cheng heavily struck Cheng Li's abdomen with the soaring fist of the foundational fist technique. Taking advantage of the fact that Cheng Li was bent over in pain and had difficulty concentrating, He quickly lifted his left leg and landed a heavy blow on his forehead with his knee. Cheng-Li wanted to beg for mercy, but he didn't even have the time to say a few threatening words before he died. After killing Cheng-Li, Yu Haoran's gaze turned towards Wu Zhengjun. The battle intent in his eyes kept surging, causing Wu Zhengjun to involuntarily take a few steps back. As the saying goes, a tiger father will not beget a dog son. Young Master Yu's strength is admirable. I, Wu Zhengjun, do not believe that my strength is on par with yours. Seeing Yu Haoran's eyes filled with battle intent, Wu Jun could not help but shiver and quickly said with a smile. Wu Zhengjun was not even a match for Cheng-Li, who had mastered the Shadow Snake Hand to a certain degree. Therefore, he knew that he was not even a match for Yu Haoran, who could easily defeat and kill Cheng-Li. You don't have to be humble. Actually, your strength is very strong. Even I do not have full confidence that I can defeat you. Taking a deep breath and calming the battle intent that kept surging in his heart, Yu Haoran spoke the truth. Wu Zhengjun's physique was a very special kind of hidden physique. It was the kind of physique that made him more courageous the more he was pushed to the brink. The more desperate he was, the more he could unleash his strength. Now, with his cultivation as a fourth-grade martial disciple, it would not be easy for him to defeat Wu Zhengjun, who had reached the peak of the fifth-grade martial disciple and possessed a special physique. Unless he was willing to overdraft a portion of his potential and use a secret technique that could increase his strength. However, his goal in entering the primeval forest this time was to fight for spirit herbs that could increase one's vitality and potential. He didn't want to waste too much time on Wu Zhengjun. Originally, Wu Zhengjun thought that Yu Haoran, who could easily kill Cheng-Li, would be as arrogant and condescending as Cheng Zhangyu just now. Yu Haoran would take the opportunity to humiliate and even kill him. Therefore, Wu Zhengjun had secretly prepared to escape. But what he didn't expect was that Yu Haoran's attitude towards him would be so gentle. Yu Haoran's amiable attitude made Wu Zhengjun feel very ashamed. He was ashamed that he wanted to rely on his superior strength to ruthlessly humiliate his opponent. Young Master Yu, there's less than a month until the sex selection competition. Why don't we choose that time to challenge each other? Sure. Nodding his head, Yu Haoran agreed. Although the final results of the sex selection competition would affect the selection of the sect's principle of selecting disciples was to pay attention to the performance of the contestants during the competition. Fighting with Wu Zhengjun, who had a special physique and could become more courageous the more he fought, could not only increase his battle experience, but also reveal his talent and strength. It would be easier to attract the attention of the sect. Of course, Yu Haoran didn't need to attract too much attention from the sect. He only needed to attract the attention of the sect from his previous life. It would be enough for him to return to the sect and return to the sect. At the same time, he also hoped to use his own pressure to make Wu Zhengjun reveal his special physique. Through this, he could gain Wu Zhengjun's goodwill and friendship. Also, I am not the young clan leader of the Yu clan, nor am I the young master of some large clan. If you, Wu Zhengjun, think highly of me, then call me Haoran in the future. Goodbye. Clasping his hands, Yu Haoran said goodbye, and then turned to enter the dense primitive forest. Phew! Looking at Yu Haoran, who turned to enter the dense primitive forest, Wu Zhengjun couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Then, a trace of worry appeared on his face. Because of his age and status, although he didn't know what Yu Haoran had experienced in the Yu clan, he knew that Yu Haoran had just reached adulthood and had only been exposed to martial arts for a month. In just over a month's time, his cultivation had reached the 4th grade of martial disciple, and his strength had reached the 6th grade of martial disciple. The cultivation and strength that Yu Haoran had just revealed shocked Wu Zhengjun, and he had a vague feeling in his heart. He felt that in a few years' time, Yu Haoran, with his monstrous talent, would definitely become the next Yu Hongji. He might even surpass Yu Hongji and become the first person in Pingyang City to break through to the martial ancestor realm. With the Wu clan's current revenge and coercion against the Yu clan, the grudge between the two clans would definitely deepen. When Yu Haoran truly matured, the Wu clan would most likely be in danger. They might even be in danger of being exterminated. Therefore, he wanted to immediately return to the Wu clan and inform them that they needed to be wary of Yu Haoran. It would be best if they could send martial warriors or martial masters to directly eliminate Yu Haoran and eliminate the hidden danger in advance. However, when he thought of Yu Haoran's attitude towards him and the prejudice and injustice that the Wu clan had towards him, he hesitated. Forget it. Life and death are up to fate. If Yu Haoran really exterminated the Wu clan, I'll just fight him to the death. After weighing the pros and cons, Wu Xingjun gave up on the idea of informing Wu Xingjun. Then, he walked to Cheng Li's corpse and bent down to lift it up. Then, he entered the dense, primitive forest. Die! His heavy fist, which contained 80% of his elemental energy, directly knocked down a level 10, grade 6 spotted blue tiger that was about 2 meters tall and 5 meters long. Looking at the spotted blue tiger that fell to the ground and let out a few blood-curdling screams before finally dying, Yu Haoran's expression became serious. He didn't know if it was because of his bad luck or if something was about to happen in the dense primitive forest. Ever since he entered the dense primitive forest, he had been constantly being attacked by ferocious beasts and strange beasts. At first, it was still okay. He only encountered ordinary beasts. With his strength, he only needed to glare and shout to scare them away. However, after he entered the dense primitive forest for a few miles, he began to be attacked by strange beasts. Although the strength of these strange beasts was average and most of them were low-level level 10 beasts, there were too many of them. Moreover, they didn't fear death and wouldn't stop until they died. This caused him to be in a lot of trouble. After all, he was only a grade 4 martial disciple. The amount of elemental energy in his dantian was limited. It would be difficult for him to hold on for a long time. Chapter 16. In the primitive jungle, Yu Haoran sat down cross-legged. He planned to recover his elemental energy and physical strength first. Once he was at his peak, he would go to the depths of the primitive jungle to snatch the spirit herbs that were about to appear. Although the spirit energy in the primitive jungle was not as abundant as that in the Victor, it was still relatively rich compared to the Yu clan shores area. With the help of the relatively abundant spirit energy in the primitive jungle and the Great Mystery Heart Sutra's absorption of the spirit energy, it took less than 10 minutes for the elemental energy in his energy center to recover 70%. Of course, the rapid recovery of his elemental energy was also directly related to his low cultivation level. Just as he was about to continue absorbing the spirit energy to recover his elemental energy, he suddenly felt a warning in his heart. His habit of many years made him quickly stop the circulation of the Great Mystery Heart Sutra. Then, he adjusted his breathing and heartbeat, trying his best to blend in with the surrounding environment. After that, Yu Haoran began to observe the situation under the tree through the gaps between the leaves. It was not long, only slightly more than 10 seconds. Accompanied by a slight tremor from the ground, a battered and exhausted figure quickly appeared in his line of sight. Behind that figure, a 3-meter-tall, muscular exotic beast was rapidly closing in on him. Thick Mountain Bear. After seeing the appearance of the mutated beast, Yu Haoran could not help but gasp. The Thick Mountain Bear was one of the kings of mutated beasts. Its strength was far superior to that of ordinary mutated beasts of the same level. It was definitely the overlord of the primitive jungle. Yu Haoran really did not expect that the primitive jungle used for the training of young practitioners in Pingyang City would actually have a king of mutated beasts like the Thick Mountain Bear. If the 3 major clans and the mayor's residents of Pingyang City knew about this, they would probably immediately send out peak martial warriors or even martial masters to capture the Thick Mountain Bear. As the king of mutated beasts, the Thick Mountain Bear's entire body was a treasure. The bear's gallbladder could be used to refine top-notch elixirs. The bear's skin could be used to refine top-notch defensive artifacts. The energy contained in the bear's meat could directly increase one's cultivation level. More importantly, the Thick Mountain Bear's blood contained a trace of special origin blood essence. Using a special secret method, the origin blood essence could be extracted. Origin blood essence was something that only the kings of exotic beasts or exotic beasts with divine beast bloodlines could possess. Not only could origin blood essence allow one to directly break through one's cultivation realm and increase one's strength and potential, it could also be fused into pills, increasing the medicinal efficacy and success rate of the pills by several times. Shaking his head, Yuhauran threw the greedy thoughts out of his mind. He then lowered his head and carefully observed the approaching thick mountain bear. Yuhauran's expression gradually became serious. The thick mountain bear was close to 3 meters tall, and the white hair on its forehead was about to turn brown. This meant that the thick mountain bear in front of them had reached the peak of the 10th rank. According to the difference in strength between humans and beasts, this thick mountain bear's true strength had already reached the peak of the 9th grade of martial disciple. However, its true strength was probably beyond the peak of the 9th grade of martial disciple. It was very likely that it had reached the martial warrior realm. More importantly, as a king of exotic beasts with an earth attribute physique, the thick mountain bear's defense was even more powerful. Ordinary martial skills and weapons would have a hard time even breaking through its skin's defense, let alone injuring it. If he wanted to defeat or even kill this thick mountain bear, it would be very difficult for him to do so with his current strength. Unless he overdrew a portion of his potential and used some secret method he had learned before. However, he still hadn't recovered the life force he had used to exchange time acceleration with the Thowling Bear. Yuhauran didn't want to overdraw his potential, so he continued to restrain his aura and tried his best to blend in with the surroundings to avoid being discovered by the thick mountain bear. For some unknown reason, the figure that had been running away suddenly stopped when he reached the tree that Yuhauran was hiding in. Instead, he leaned against the tree and panted heavily while vigilantly looking at the thick mountain bear that was constantly approaching. Only now did Yuhauran clearly see the person's appearance. So it's him. After seeing the person's appearance, Yuhauran immediately recalled the person's origin. This person was the Chang clan's disciple who had followed Chang Zhangyu into the forest. He was a peak 6th grade martial disciple. He was also the person who had warned Cheng Li not to kill him before entering the forest. Facing the thick mountain bear that was famous for its defense and strength, not to mention a mid-6th grade martial disciple, even a peak 9th grade martial disciple, or an expert who had just entered the martial warrior realm, wouldn't be a match for the thick mountain bear. As such, Yuhauran couldn't understand what kind of methods and confidence this Chang clan's disciple had to face the thick mountain bear head-on. Awoo! Seeing that its opponent was no longer running away, the thick mountain bear stood upright and pounded its chest with all its might, howling a few times before accelerating towards the Chang clan's disciple. When the thick mountain bear was less than 10 meters away from the Chang clan's disciple, the Chang clan's disciple suddenly took out a black ball from his bosom and threw it at the thick mountain bear. How is this possible? Seeing the black ball taken out by the Chang clan's disciple, Yuhauran couldn't help but secretly exclaim. He also had a question in his heart. The black ball that the Chang clan's disciple had just thrown out was called the black saliva ball. It was refined from the feces of 6 special poisons and 6 special poisons. The poison formed after the explosion of the black saliva ball was extremely toxic. Not to mention the thick mountain bear that was at the peak of the 10th grade. Even a peak of the 8th grade thick mountain bear would not be able to resist the poison of the black saliva ball. However, the refining of the black saliva ball was very difficult. Not to mention the fact that the materials needed to refine it were very difficult to find. It also required at least a grandmaster alchemist who was proficient in poison to refine it. Alchemy was the same as martial arts. There were a total of 10 grades and 9 grades: Pill Disciple, Pill Scholar, Pill Master, Pill Ancestor, Pill King, Pill Emperor, Pill Saint, Pill Venerable, Pill Emperor, and Pill God. Pingyang City was located in a remote area. Not to mention a grandmaster alchemist. Even a pill disciple with a little talent in alchemy was rare. As the black ball accurately hit the thick mountain bear, the black ball instantly exploded and formed a black fog that quickly shrouded the thick mountain bear. 1 second later, an unusually sorrowful scream came from the black fog. 3 seconds later, the scream in the black fog became weaker and weaker. 5 seconds later, the Chung clan's disciple used his essence force to disperse the black fog, revealing the thick mountain bear that had already fallen to the ground and died. The cautious Chung clan's disciple did not rashly go forward to check. First, he picked up a few stones from the ground and threw them heavily at the thick mountain bear's body like a hidden weapon. After confirming that the thick mountain bear was really dead, the Chung clan's disciple made 3 long and 2 short strange sounds. 30 seconds later, the same sound came from the dense forest. 1 minute later, 5 Chung clan's disciples, led by Chung Zhongyu, quickly appeared in front of the thick mountain bear's body. Chapter 17. In the primitive jungle. Seeing the dead, thick mountain bear on the ground, Chung Zhongyu thanked the Chung family's disciple who poisoned the bear. "Brother Yu, you're too polite. This is what I should do." Hearing Chung Zhongyu's concern, the Chung family's disciple called Chung Yuan immediately said politely, "Chung Yuan, after this treasure hunt is over, I'll report it to the family according to this merit. At that time, you'll be rewarded with elixirs and top-notch cultivation methods." After promising the benefits, Chung Zhongyu's eyes stopped on the thick mountain bear's body. Looking at the thick mountain bear's body, which had been corroded by the black saliva ball's poisonous gas, Chung Zhongyu's face showed a trace of pity. Then he ordered another fat Chung family's disciple, Chung Yi, take the bear's gallbladder. "Yes, brother Yu." Chung Yi obeyed the order and then directly cut open the stomach of the thick mountain bear with the sword in his hand. He then took out a fist-sized bear gallbladder and put it into a wooden box that was prepared in advance. "Let's go." After Chung Yi put the gallbladder away, Chung Zhongyu ordered and took the lead into the depths of the jungle. 5 minutes after Chung Zhongyu and the others left, Yu Haoran jumped down from the tree and walked to the dissected thick mountain bear's body. Looking at the dissected body without the gallbladder, Yu Haoran could not help but sigh. Then he bent down and pulled a hair from the thick mountain bear's body, then put it in his nose and sniffed it carefully. Then a look of realization appeared on his face. Then he could not help but frown. Before his rebirth, his nickname in the cultivation world, or rather his honorific title, was the Merciless Sword Emperor. The reason for this nickname was that in his previous life, he bore the mystery of his parents' murder and the hatred of his sex destruction. In order to find out the mystery of his parents' murder and to avenge his sex destruction, he did everything he could. His character was both good and evil, and he treated people as both enemies and friends. At the same time, limited by his background, aptitude, and opportunities, in order to quickly improve his strength, he was forced by reality to choose the way of poison, which was extremely fast and allowed him to kill enemies above his level. However, after his rebirth, Yu Haoran did not want to get involved in the way of poison. Firstly, cultivating the Tao of poison was too dangerous. The slightest carelessness could put one's life in danger. Secondly, the Tao of poison was only a minor Tao after all. The laws of poison were ranked very low among the myriad of laws. The further one progressed, the weaker the laws of poison's might would be. Although he didn't want to dabble in the Tao of poison, he hadn't lost his understanding of the Tao of poison from his previous life. Just now, from the thick mountain bear's fur, he discovered that the black saliva ball used by the Chung clan's disciples was the most authentic black saliva ball. However, what puzzled him was that Pingyang City was located in a remote area and the martial arts were not flourishing. Not to mention elixir grandmasters and poison masters who could refine black saliva balls. Even elixir disciples who could refine the simplest chi refinement elixir were rare. Then, where did Chung Zhongyu get this black saliva ball? Since he couldn't figure it out, Yu Haoran didn't pursue the matter too much. However, when he saw the thick mountain bear's corpse, he had a look of pity on his face, just like Chung Zhongyu. Before his rebirth, he had obtained an incomplete mystic technique from a ruin. It was a mystic technique that allowed one to absorb the blood essence of an exotic beast into one's body and temporarily transform into an exotic beast. He had cultivated that incomplete mystic technique before and had also used the blood essence of an exotic beast to transform. He knew that the more noble the blood essence of an exotic beast was, the more powerful the mystic technique would be and the longer the duration of the transformation. The side effects of the transformation would also be smaller. If he could extract the blood essence of the thick mountain bear, he could choose to face Cheng Zhangyu and the others head-on, or even the more powerful Qin Hua. Taking a deep breath and dispelling the depression in his heart, Yu Haoran raised his head and looked into the depths of the dense forest. His originally worried eyes became firm, and he strode forward to catch up with Cheng Zhangyu and the others. Perhaps it was because Cheng Zhangyu and the others had attracted the exotic beast's firepower, or perhaps it was because the exotic beast had disappeared. For the rest of the journey, he only occasionally encountered one or two exotic beasts, and they were only ordinary exotic beasts. Therefore, he didn't waste too much time and entered the depths of the dense forest. In the depths of the primitive forest, there were spiritual herbs that were about to mature. He had learned about it from the idle chatter between the disciples of the three major clans and the city lord's mansion when he participated in the sex selection in his previous life. He only had some general information about the spiritual herbs, but he didn't know the specific location of the spiritual herbs or when they would truly mature. Therefore, after entering the depths of the dense forest, he didn't act rashly. Instead, he hid in a hidden bush and waited for the right opportunity. Not long after, as light footsteps gradually approached, Yu Haoran raised his head slightly and observed the people who were about to appear through the gaps in the bushes. Two young men, about 17 or 18 years old, dressed in gorgeous clothes and with extraordinary temperaments, appeared in his line of sight. Seeing the two young men in his line of sight, Yu Haoran's breathing began to become heavier, and his eyes revealed a strong murderous intent. Fortunately, he knew that the two young men were extraordinary and very vigilant, so he quickly controlled his emotions and tried his best to blend in with the surroundings. Big brother, we have now entered the core area of the primitive forest. We may encounter 9th rank exotic beasts at any time. Where's the spiritual herb you mentioned? Has it matured yet? Of the two young men, one of the younger ones asked the other, who was more mature. Qin, don't worry. I have seen that spiritual herb with my own eyes. After the incident, I have specially searched for information. It will mature in at most 15 minutes. At that time, the main root of the spiritual herb will belong to me, and the fibrous roots and leaves will belong to you, the young man called third brother replied confidently. After that, he raised his head and observed the surroundings. Finally, he chose a direction and continued to lead the young man called Qin deeper into the forest. After the two young men left, Yu Haoran, who was hiding in the bushes, stood up. The murderous intent that he had just controlled surged out again. The two young men who appeared just now were the direct descendants of the city lord's residence in Pingyang City. The young man who was called Big Brother was called Qin Hua. He was the only son of the city lord of Pingyang City, Qin Ren. The reason why Yu Haoran had such a strong murderous intent towards him was not only because he was the fated person for the spiritual herb, but also because he had many conflicts with Qin Hua after joining the sect in his previous life. Moreover, there was a senior brother who doted on him very much who had died at Qin Hua's hands. Other than that, when he was investigating the mystery of his parents' death in his previous life, he had discovered that the city lord's residence was involved in the secret battle a year ago. It was just that he had no concrete evidence. Perhaps the murderous intent in his eyes was too strong, alerting a 9th rank exotic beast hiding in the dark. A strong aura of the exotic beast pressed down on him, hurriedly dispelling the murderous intent in his heart and readjusting his mentality. Yu Haoran carefully approached the direction Qin Hua had gone in earlier. 10 minutes later, Yu Haoran, who was advancing cautiously, suddenly heard indistinct angry rebukes coming from ahead. Listening carefully, Yu Haoran couldn't help but feel elated. Chapter 18. Inside the Primeval Forest. Cheng Zhangyu, as the saying goes, don't forget the person who dug the well. If it wasn't for my father secretly warning you Hongji and blocking more than 3 attacks from the Yu clan, your Qin clan would have long been exterminated. You, Cheng Zhangyu, would still be like me, one of the 3 great young masters of Pingyang City. Just as Yu Haoran was quietly hiding behind a tree with a diameter of more than 1 meter, Qin Hua's mocking voice rang in his ears. Huh. In the face of Qin Hua's mockery, Cheng Zhangyu chuckled a few times and retorted with the same tone. Qin Hua, don't flatter yourself. Your father stepped forward to stop you, Hongji, not because he wanted to save the Cheng clan and the Wu clan. Your father was only afraid that you Hongji would unify Pingyang City and then use the city's resources to break through to the martial ancestor realm. This would affect your Qin clan's rule over Pingyang City. At this point, Cheng Zhangyu said with a faint smile, moreover, you Hongji didn't make a move against my Cheng clan not because he was afraid of your city lore mansion, but because he was afraid of the Emperor Qin kingdom behind you. So don't be arrogant in front of me. Good, very good. In the face of Cheng Zhangyu's disdainful mockery, Qin Hua's face was unusually gloomy and his heart was burning with anger. However, he could only temporarily suppress the anger in his heart. Although his strength was far stronger than Cheng Zhangyu, and he was confident that he could kill Cheng Zhangyu and the others in the end, his goal this time was the stock of spirit medicine that could improve his cultivation and enhance his potential. If he could obtain that spirit medicine, not only would he be able to open the last meridian in the shortest time possible and successfully advance to the peak of the 9th grade martial disciple, but the increase in his potential and strength would also allow him to perform outstandingly in the sex selection competition and eventually attract the attention of the top sex. If he could enter a top sect, not only would it be beneficial to his growth, but it would also increase his weight in the empire and thus the status of his faction. The conflict between Qin Hua and Cheng Zhangyu made Yu Haoran feel very gratified. Although he didn't have the slightest good impression of the Cheng clan, his dislike of the city lore mansion and the Cheng clan was even stronger. He couldn't wait for the two sides to quickly fight and die together. However, what happened next shattered his beautiful thoughts. Cheng Zhangyu, I still have things to take care of right now. I don't want to continue talking nonsense with you. If you're not convinced, we'll see who's the real deal in the sex selection in a month's time. Qin Hua impatiently challenged. Qin Hua had done a thorough research on the spirit medicine and knew that before the spirit medicine fully matured, there would be no abnormalities. However, the moment it matured, not only would it crazily devour the world energy, it would also emit an alluring fragrance. Not only was this fragrance very attractive to human warriors, but it was also fatally attractive to the strange beasts in the primitive jungle. He was worried that the moment the spirit medicine matured, it would attract Cheng Zhangyu's attention. He was even more worried that the moment the spirit medicine matured, it would be eaten by the strange beasts around the spirit medicine. Therefore, he was now in a hurry to collect the spiritual medicine. He didn't want to delay time because of Cheng Zhangyu. Sure, Cheng Zhangyu also had important matters to attend to, so he gladly agreed to Qin Hua's challenge. After that, the two parties slowly pulled apart the distance between them and continued to go deeper into the jungle in different directions. Yu Haoran, who had walked out from behind the big tree, couldn't help but frown. Originally, he thought that Cheng Zhangyu's goal in entering the primitive jungle was the same as Qin Hua's. It was for the spirit medicine that could increase one's cultivation and potential. However, from the direction in which the two parties were going, it seemed like their goals were different. Thinking back to Cheng Zhangyu's outstanding performance in the sex selection in his previous life, Qin Hua thought back to his previous life. Could it be that there was another rare treasure in the depths of the primitive jungle that was not inferior to the spirit medicine? However, this thought didn't bother Yu Haoran for too long. After choosing the path that Qin Hua was going to take, he hurriedly followed. After all, he didn't know what Cheng Zhangyu's goal was. What he urgently needed now was the spirit medicine that could replenish his vitality. Following Qin Hua closely was his primary goal. Exotic beasts were far more sensitive than human cultivators when it came to detecting spirit medicine. Even if the spirit medicine hadn't fully matured yet, it had already been detected by many highly vigilant exotic beasts. They relied on their instincts to constantly approach the location of the spirit medicine. Therefore, Yu Haoran began to encounter all kinds of exotic beasts in the following part of his journey. Fortunately, these exotic beasts' goal was the spirit medicine. As long as they didn't provoke him, there wouldn't be too many conflicts. Even more fortunately, with the guidance of these exotic beasts, he didn't need to carefully follow Qin Hua and Qin Du anymore. This allowed him to move much faster. Just when he was less than a kilometer away from the true core of the primitive jungle, an alluring aroma assaulted his nostrils. Smelling this aroma, Yuharan immediately felt refreshed. At the same time, the exotic beasts that had been living peacefully suddenly went berserk. They sped up towards the source of the aroma, while crazily attacking their companions. Although most of the exotic beasts that appeared now were only at the 10th rank, there were too many of them. Moreover, he still had to face Qin Hua and Qin Du therefore. Yuharan consciously slowed down, trying his best to avoid fighting with those frenzied exotic beasts. At the same time, he also began to look around, looking for the more precious corpses of exotic beasts. He would take their valuable body parts so that he could exchange them for some ordinary medicinal herbs when he returned to Pingyang City and continued to raise his cultivation. Afterwards, he slowly walked forward, avoiding fighting with the exotic beasts while collecting the valuable body parts of the exotic beasts. Just as he was about to take the heart that contained the blood essence from the 4th exotic beast corpse, he suddenly noticed that the exotic beasts that were fighting had stopped attacking. Moreover, all of them were looking forward. Yuharan quickly scanned his surroundings and hid under the corpse of a huge exotic beast that had just died. Then, through the fur of the exotic beast, Yuharan carefully observed the movements in front of him. It's really it. Looking at the 30-centimeter tall, red sapling about 100 meters in front of him, Yuharan's face revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. However, his 100 years of mental cultivation in his previous life allowed him to quickly calm down. He then looked for the opponent, who was snatching the spiritual herb this time. Qin Hua. After careful observation, he finally found them at the top of a large tree about 20 meters away from the spiritual herb. Although they were enemies, Yuharan couldn't help but nod his head in praise when he saw that they didn't act rashly. It seemed like they were the same as him, planning to take advantage of the situation. Since they didn't take the initiative to make a move, Yuharan couldn't possibly make a move first. Moreover, the 4 exotic beasts surrounding the spiritual herb made him not dare to act rashly. Chapter 19. In the depths of the primordial forest. As the fragrance of the spiritual herb grew stronger and stronger, the exotic beasts in the surroundings grew more and more irritable. However, the 4 Tier 9 exotic beasts in the lead made them not dare to act rashly. As such, they calmed down for the time being. However, as the 3 tender leaves at the top of the small tree continued to expand and gradually turn yellow and withered, the several hundred Tier 10 exotic beasts in the surroundings could no longer hold themselves back. Under the stimulation of the rich fragrance of the spiritual herb, and under the temptation of obtaining the spiritual herb, they ignored the threat of the difference in cultivation level and took the initiative to attack the 4 Tier 9 exotic beasts. Although the difference in cultivation level allowed the 4 Tier 9 exotic beasts to easily kill the Tier 10 exotic beasts, they couldn't overcome the sheer number of Tier 10 exotic beasts present. In just 30 seconds, the 4 Tier 9 exotic beasts were injured. Of course, the price of their injuries was the death of several dozen Tier 10 exotic beasts. Seeing the number of exotic beasts dwindling, Yuharan, who was hiding under the corpses of the exotic beasts, didn't relax in the slightest. On the contrary, his expression gradually grew anxious. In a short span of 30 seconds, 1/5 of the originally dark green leaves had already begun to wither and turn yellow. Judging by the speed at which they were turning yellow and withered, it would take at most 2 minutes for the 3 tender leaves to completely wither and fall off. The falling of the tender leaves meant that the spiritual herb at the root had sunk deep into the ground and disappeared completely. No. Looking at the 3 withered leaves, a thought suddenly flashed across the originally anxious Yuharan's mind. In his previous life, the reason why Qin Hua was able to become the champion of the sect selection and was chosen by the Heavenly Sword sect, one of the 7 major factions in Tianxian continent, was because he had consumed this spiritual herb that could raise his cultivation and potential. In other words, Qin Hua had definitely made his move before the 3 tender leaves turned yellow and withered. It was just unknown if he had exchanged blows with any of the surviving exotic beasts. Thinking up to this point, Yuharan's anxious mood slowly calmed down. He continued to observe the situation in front of him. Another 30 seconds passed. Not only were the injuries on the 4 Tier 9 exotic beasts getting more and more serious, their demonic force and stamina were also rapidly depleting, making it impossible for them to kill the Tier 10 exotic beasts as easily as before. However, less than half of the original several hundred Tier 10 exotic beasts were left. After the third 30 seconds, one of the 4 Type 9 exotic beasts, a Type 9 blue tiger, had its neck bitten off by a Type 10 exotic beast, ending its life. Yu Haoran didn't really care about the death of the Rank 9 beast. His attention was completely focused on Qin Hua, and Qin do this was because he discovered that the two people who were originally hiding motionlessly at the top of the tree had already begun to quietly take out their weapons following Banlan's death. They looked like they were ready to attack at any time. Bye. Although 9th grade exotic beasts were very strong, equivalent to human martial warrior experts, facing the siege of hundreds of 10th grade exotic beasts, not only were they heavily injured, but their demonic energy and internal energy were also greatly depleted, causing their vigilance to drop greatly. It wasn't until Qin Hua and Qin Du's weapons stabbed into their bodies that the 2 Tier 9 exotic beasts finally reacted. But it was already too late. The poisonous swords had not only stabbed into their vitals, but also directly cut off their life force. Qin Du, I'll hold off these exotic beasts. You go collect the spiritual herbs. Qin Hua, whose strength had reached the peak of martial disciple 8th grade, instructed Qin Du, whose cultivation was also at the peak of martial disciple 7th grade. Don't worry, big brother. Qin Du answered casually and turned around, running straight for the blood-red sapling. Seeing the spiritual herbs they were desperately fighting for were about to fall into the hands of the two humans, the dozens of Tier 10 exotic beasts that were originally fighting each other began to attack Qin Hua and Qin Du with all their might, just like how they attacked the Tier 9 exotic beasts earlier. However, Qin Hua, who was brimming with Yuan Li and had mastered a profound martial technique, was different from the 4 Tier 9 exotic beasts. He only needed to block the attacks of the exotic beasts and buy time for Qin Du to collect the spiritual herbs. He didn't need to risk his life against the exotic beasts. Therefore, not only was he able to block the attacks of the exotic beasts for a while, he was also not in too much danger. Taking out a tool specially used to collect spiritual herbs, he carefully dug out the small sapling, revealing the blood-red root ginseng that was 90% similar to ginseng under the sapling. Qin Du's face revealed an uncontrollable joy. Carefully separating the root ginseng from the sapling, he then put them into a box and a cloth bag. Qin Du turned his head and shouted to Qin Hua, "Big brother, the spiritual herbs are in our hands. Let's retreat quickly." Careful. Hearing that the spiritual herbs were in their hands, Qin Hua was overjoyed. Using a group attack sword technique to repel a few Tier 10 exotic beasts, Qin Hua quickly retreated, preparing to approach Qin Du, but just as he was about to turn around and approach Qin Du, he discovered a young man covered in blood, his face covered in exotic beast fur, appearing beside Qin Du to be able to appear in the depths of the primitive forest at this time and disguise his appearance. Qin Hua didn't need to think too much to know that the other party's goal was the spiritual herbs in Qin Du's hands. However, his warning was too late. Just as Qin Du was about to turn around and defend himself, a poisonous exotic beast tooth directly pierced his neck artery. Qin Du didn't even have time to look at who ambushed him before his vision turned black, and he fell to the ground, dead. Reaching out to take the box with the spiritual herbs and ignoring the bag with the sapling, the human cultivator, whose face was covered in exotic beast fur, quickly fled towards the outskirts of the forest. Damn it! Seeing the treasure snatcher desperately fleeing, Qin Hua almost went mad with anger. Although he really wanted to give chase immediately, the exotic beast that had surrounded him blocked his path. Left with no other choice, he could only kill the exotic beast blocking his way first, then chase after the thief who stole the spiritual herb. Of course, he killed the exotic beast first. Aside from the exotic beasts blocking his path, he also didn't have to worry about the other party escaping from his grasp. This was because when the other party ambushed Qin Du, he revealed that his cultivation was only at the early 4th grade of martial disciple. With such a cultivation, it was impossible for him to leave the forest in a short period of time. Moreover, he suspected that the person who stole the spiritual herbs was most likely one of Cheng Zhongyu's men. Because of the encounter not long ago, Cheng Zhongyu would definitely be suspicious of him appearing in the depths of the primitive forest. Moreover, there seemed to be an early 4th grade martial disciple by Cheng Zhongyu's side. After escaping the encirclement of the exotic beasts, the cultivator whose face was covered in exotic beast fur turned his head to look at Qin Hua, who was surrounded by exotic beasts, and felt joy in his heart. Then, he channeled all his energy into his legs and sped up his escape. However, the direction he fled in wasn't the outskirts of the forest, but instead turned and continued deeper into the forest. This made Qin Hua even more certain of his guess. After fleeing for 1,000 meters, the cultivator whose face was covered in exotic beast fur suddenly stopped. He looked around and finally came to a hidden bush. Then, he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Chapter 20. Inside the Victor. Yu Haoran reached out to pluck off the beast fur on his face and wiped away the remaining blood on his face. Looking at the box containing the spirit herbs in his hands, Yu Haoran's face was filled with joy. That's right, the person who ambushed Qin Du and stole the spirit herbs was none other than Yu Haoran. In fact, when Qin Hua and Qin Du were about to make their move, Yu Haoran had a rough idea of their plan. But considering his own situation and the Yu clan's attitude towards him, he knew that he shouldn't expose his identity before participating in the sex selection. Therefore, he could only use the blood and hair of the exotic beast to disguise himself, so that he could hide his identity while stealing the spirit herbs. Fortunately, things developed as he expected. Not only did he successfully obtain the spirit herbs, but he also didn't expose his identity. He sat down cross-legged and reached out to open the box containing the spirit herbs. Following that, a rich aroma assaulted his senses. After inhaling the rich aroma of the spirit herbs, the excitement in his heart from successfully stealing the spirit herbs gradually calmed down. At the same time, the elemental energy he had used to escape with all his might was instantly replenished. Just as Yu Haoran was sizing up the spirit herbs in the box, a pleasantly surprised voice sounded. Blood ginseng, and a 300-year-old one at that. It's a 9th grade, 3rd grade blood ginseng. In response, Yu Haoran didn't turn around. The only other person who could appear in the Victor besides himself was Thaling of the Victor. Yu Haoran, can I discuss something with you? Seeing Yu Haoran quickly close the box containing the spirit herbs, Thaling, who had been very calm all this time, suddenly asked in a fawning tone. No. Without waiting for Thaling to speak, Yu Haoran directly refused. Thaling, there's less than a month until the Tianxian continent's sex selection. If I want to grow quickly, entering a sect is the best choice. So I need this 9th grade, 3rd grade blood ginseng to increase my cultivation and potential. According to the amount of energy it contained, the strength of its effects after consumption, and the number of existing ones, spiritual medicine was divided into 10 levels and 9 grades, a total of 99 grades. Among them, the first rank of the 10th level was the lowest, and the 9th rank of the first rank was the highest. Pingyang City was located in a remote area. Not to mention 9th level spirit herbs. Even 10th level 7th grade spirit herbs were extremely rare. Not to mention, the blood ginseng was originally a special type of spirit medicine. Not only could it directly break through one's cultivation, but it could also increase one's vitality and potential. Its value is not inferior to ordinary 8th grade spirit medicine. Therefore, how could Yu Haoran give it up so easily? 6 months of cultivation in exchange for half of the blood ginseng. Thaling was not surprised that Yu Haoran could guess its thoughts, so it began to think about how to make the other party agree to its request. The opportunity to use time acceleration was probably the best condition. Thaling, this 9th grade, 3rd grade blood ginseng, can not only make up for the 3 months of vitality I lost, but it can also increase my vitality by another 1 to 2 years. 6 months of cultivation? Dream on, Yu Haoran said sarcastically. Although Victor came from a forbidden area of the demon god's tomb and also had the ability to accelerate time, its method of seeking profit made Howard very unhappy. At the same time, his cultivation had increased to the early 4th grade of martial disciple, and his reckless bull fist was about to reach perfection. He was no longer afraid of Victor's threat. Moreover, with his 100 years of cultivation experience in his previous life, he was confident that he could achieve his goal without Victor's help. Therefore, he was so casual and impolite with Victor. At the same time, he wanted to use this impolite attitude to further maximize his benefits. 6 months of cultivation and a gradeless body tempering technique in exchange for half of the blood ginseng. Howard's impolite sarcasm did not make Thaling feel any dissatisfaction. It continued to raise the bargaining chip, hoping to move Howard. No. Howard shook his head and continued to refuse. Howard, what do you want in exchange for half of the blood ginseng? Thaling thought that the conditions it proposed for the blood ginseng were very honest, but Howard flatly refused without any consideration. This made Thaling somewhat unhappy, so its tone began to become impatient. 6 months of cultivation in exchange for a set of body refining techniques that cannot be lower than the peak of the earth level, and help me save a person whose cultivation has been crippled. Hearing the impatience in Thaling's tone, Howard knew that it was best to stop while he was ahead, because he was very clear that he could not offend Thaling too much for the time being. After all, the other party was now in his knowledge sea. If it did something to his knowledge sea, with his current cultivation, he would not be able to detect it for the time being. How do you want to save her? Hearing Howard take the initiative to propose conditions, Thaling was delighted. 6 months of cultivation would only consume 1/5 of the blood ginseng's energy. It originally wanted to teach Howard the gradeless body refining technique, so that he could use it to increase his strength, so that he could face the tribulation in the future. But it was a little worried about Howard's 3rd condition. It was afraid that the target of the rescue would be a powerful person with unfathomable strength. My sister Yusiki's cultivation was crippled a year ago. I want you to help her recover without harming her foundation. Howard raised his head and looked at Thaling, his tone full of anticipation. With 100 years of cultivation experience from his previous life, the victor's ability to accelerate time, and the blood ginseng that could increase one's cultivation and potential, he had 100% confidence that he would be able to re-enter the sect of his previous life in the sect selection competition in a month's time. But after he left the clan, what would happen to his sister? As a new disciple who had just entered the sect, he could only start off as an odd-job disciple. An odd-job disciple was the lowest rank in the sect. Not to mention bringing his sister into the sect, it was already very good that he could protect himself when he first entered the sect. After all, the rules of survival in the sect were many times crueler than the rules of survival in the clan. Leave his sister at home. With the nature of the first elder and the others, he was afraid that as soon as he left, they would dare to kill Yusiki. Therefore, before participating in the sect selection competition, his biggest worry was his sister. However, if Yusiki was able to recover her cultivation, with her talent and temperament, she would most likely become the focus of the sect during this sect selection competition. Before your sister was crippled, what was her cultivation level? Hearing that the person he was going to save was Howard's sister, Thaling knew that he was going to have to bleed this time. He might even have to give up half of the blood ginseng he had just exchanged. However, if he could let Howard participate in the sect selection competition with peace of mind, then enter the sect to speed up his cultivation and increase his chances of survival in the future, Thaling felt that it was worth it to bleed. When she was crippled, she was at the peak of the 6th grade martial disciple. No problem. He was only at the peak of the 6th grade of martial disciple. After hearing Howard's introduction, the tower spirit secretly let out a sigh of relief. If a martial master's cultivation was crippled, half of the blood ginseng's energy would not be enough to restore the dantian that was destroyed when it was crippled. But if a martial disciple's cultivation level was only at the middle stage of the martial disciple realm, with his technique and ability, he would only need 10% of the blood ginseng's energy. Chapter 21. Inside the victor, Yuhaoran did not object to Thaling taking half of the blood ginseng in advance, nor did he care. Thaling was definitely not an ordinary treasure to be able to survive in the forbidden area of the demon god's tomb and have the ability to accelerate time. Yuhaoran believed that he would keep his promise and also believed that he had the ability to repair his sister's dantian and help her recover her cultivation. After Thaling took half of the blood ginseng, he ordered Thaling, help me accelerate time. After swallowing the blood ginseng, Thaling's body, which was originally very illusory, became slightly more substantial. After hearing Yuhaoran's order, he pointed at the victor and disappeared. Although he had already achieved his goal of obtaining the blood ginseng, when he thought of Cheng Zhangyu's performance in the sex election, he suspected that Cheng Zhangyu's goal this time was the same as Qin Hua's, to collect spiritual herbs similar to the blood ginseng. Therefore, he wanted to see if he could snatch the opportunity that originally belonged to Cheng Zhangyu after refining the blood ginseng and improving his cultivation. Looking at the remaining half of the blood ginseng in the box, Yuhaoran thought for a while and finally decided to only take half of it. Although Thaling could help his sister recover her cultivation had been delayed for a year. Compared to the geniuses of the same generation in Pingyang City, she had fallen far behind. If he wanted her to have a stunning performance in the sex selection and attract the attention of the sect, she would need to further improve her cultivation and potential. Therefore, Yuhaoran planned to use the remaining half of the blood ginseng to help her. He calmed his qi and concentrated his mind and took a quarter of the blood ginseng. Then, he began to operate the Great Mystery Heart Sutra and began to absorb the special energy contained in the blood ginseng. With the absorption of the blood ginseng's energy, Yuhaoran gradually felt his lost vitality being replenished little by little, and his potential was also increasing little by little. More importantly, the special energy contained within the blood ginseng had an even stronger impact on his meridians. In just half an hour, his fourth meridian was easily opened, allowing his cultivation to rise to the peak of the 4th grade of martial disciple. He temporarily stopped absorbing the blood ginseng's energy. Relying on his previous life's cultivation experience and the abundant spiritual energy in the victor, he began to connect the newly opened 4th meridian with the other 3. Time ticked by. 20 minutes had passed in the outside world, but 2 hours had passed in the victor. As the last trace of the blood ginseng's energy disappeared, Yuhaoran, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened his eyes. A terrifying cold light flashed in his eyes. Then, the cold light disappeared and an uncontrollable joy appeared on his face. The special energy contained within the blood ginseng itself had an unimaginable effect on one's cultivation. A quarter of the energy contained within the blood ginseng had directly raised his cultivation to the peak of the 5th grade of martial disciple. If he hadn't intentionally used the blood ginseng to make up for the lost vitality and deliberately enhance his own potential, a quarter of the blood ginseng's special energy would have been enough to raise his cultivation to the peak of the 6th grade of martial disciple, or even break through to the 7th grade of martial disciple. Thinking that a quarter of the blood ginseng had such a powerful effect, Yuhaoran couldn't help but feel sorry for the 2 quarters of the blood ginseng he had just given to Thaling. Thinking of the conditions of Thaling's exchange for the blood ginseng, he hurriedly called out, "Thaling, what's the matter?" Thaling appeared in the hall and asked. Looking at Thaling's slightly more substantial body, Yuhaoran directly stated his request. How about a body refining technique without a grade? Here. Thaling was even more straightforward. He stretched out his hand and pointed, and a ball of milky white light shot into his sea of consciousness. Stardow art. After carefully tasting the body refining technique that Thaling had given him, the heartache he originally felt for giving Thaling half of the blood ginseng disappeared in an instant. At this moment, he only rejoiced in his heart, rejoiced that he had agreed to Thaling's exchange conditions. In the 100 years of cultivation experience in his previous life, he had used all kinds of methods to do things, allowing him to quickly improve his cultivation and also obtain a lot of cultivation techniques. Among these cultivation techniques, there was no lack of body refining techniques of various grades, but he had never seen or heard of such a powerful and abnormal body refining technique. The star dough art was different from the general body refining technique. It relied on swallowing the power of the stars to temper the body. The power of the stars was a higher level than the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. It contained more powerful energy. Using the power of the stars to temper the body, the effect was at least several times stronger than using spiritual chi. Of course, it was precisely because the power of the stars was too powerful that it would cause a certain amount of damage and pain when tempering the body. For this point, Yu Haoran didn't care at all. How could the pain from tempering the body be compared to the pain he felt when he tried the poison pill? He could endure the pain that was worse than death, not to mention the pain from tempering the body. Although the pagoda spirit had introduced the astral battle art and said that it was a body refinement technique without a grade, in Yu Haoran's opinion, the astral battle art's strength and freakishness was already comparable to a heaven-class cultivation technique. If the astral battle art was cultivated to its peak, it might even surpass a heaven-class cultivation technique. There were all kinds of techniques in the Tianxian continent. According to the difficulty of cultivation, the effects of the technique, and the power of the technique after cultivation, they were divided into 4 ranks: heaven, earth, black, and yellow. Each rank was further subdivided into 9 grades. Among them, heaven level 9 technique was the highest, while yellow level 1 technique was the lowest. Even though yellow level 1 technique was the lowest, it wasn't something that could be found on the continent. In Pingyang City, only the patriarchs of the 3 great clans had the qualifications to cultivate it. Furthermore, the mental cultivation technique that was regarded as the treasure of their clans was only yellow level 9. The reason why the city lord of Pingyang City's status surpassed the 3 great clans was not only because he had Emperor Qin behind him, but also because he cultivated a black level 1 mental cultivation technique. This caused his own cultivation speed and the quality of his spirit energy to be far superior to the patriarchs of the 3 great clans. Other than being pleasantly surprised by the star dough art's strength and abnormality, Yu Haoran had another thought in his mind. From Thaling's casual tone and mysterious background, he believed that Thaling definitely had a technique that was even more outstanding than the star dough art. If he wanted to exchange it for a top-notch technique, he would have to find some spirit herbs and treasures that contain vitality. Hence, his desire to snatch the spirit herbs from Cheng Zhongyu's hands was even stronger. After briefly consolidating his cultivation base after his breakthrough, Yu Haoran planned to leave Victor and look for Cheng Zhongyu and the rest. However, just as his consciousness touched the imprint, he unexpectedly sensed danger. He quickly released the imprint and informed Thaling to penetrate the walls of the pagoda. Then, he observed the situation outside Victor. Just as Thaling penetrated the walls of the pagoda and was able to see the environment outside Victor, Yu Haoran saw Qin Hua covered in blood and engaged in a life-and-death battle with Cheng Zhongyu. The people who followed Cheng Zhongyu had changed from 6 people to 3 people now. Seeing that Qin Hua and Cheng Zhongyu were already fighting, Yu Haoran was not in a hurry to leave. At the same time, through the battle of life and death, Cheng Zhongyu, who was originally thought to be talented, now seemed to be very ordinary. No wonder he had not heard any news about Cheng Zhongyu after joining the sect. It seemed that he, with his ordinary aptitude, had not achieved much in the sect. Although Cheng Zhongyu's cultivation base was the same as Qin Hua's, at the peak of martial disciple 8th grade, the quality of his own spirit energy, the use of spirit energy, and the understanding of martial arts were far inferior to Qin Hua's. Chapter 22. Inside the Primeval Forest. Qin Hua stop. Qin Hua took advantage of the fact that Cheng Zhongyu had yet to recover his strength and had no choice but to recharge his energy. Cheng Zhongyu couldn't help but roar in anger after killing Cheng Yuan, who was at the peak of his 6th grade martial disciple realm and the one who had poisoned the thick mountain bear. Cheng Zhongyu, if you want me to stop, hand over the blood ginseng you stole from me. Qin Hua roared with bloodshot eyes. Qin Hua, I've already said this more than once. I didn't send anyone to steal the blood ginseng. How could I have taken it? Hearing Qin Hua mention the blood ginseng, Cheng Zhangyu was so depressed that he wanted to die. Originally, he had used the thick mountain bear's gall and made ample preparations to kill the guardian beast that had just advanced to the 9th grade and obtained the spirit fruit that could directly increase his cultivation. Because of this, he had also lost an elite disciple of the Cheng clan who had reached the middle of the 7th grade martial disciple realm. But what Cheng Zhangyu didn't expect was that before he could celebrate the spirit fruit, Qin Hua would suddenly appear and kill his only comrade, who was at the beginning of the 4th grade martial disciple realm, without saying a word. Although the city lord's mansion was strong, the Cheng clan was not weak either. Moreover, the Cheng clan disciple who had just been killed was his half-brother. Moreover, Qin Hua's appearance at this time made him mistakenly think that Qin Hua was here to steal the spirit medicine in his hands. Therefore, Cheng Zhangyu didn't hesitate and directly fought with Qin Hua. However, after the real fight, Cheng Zhangyu finally understood why the city lord's mansion was above the 3 major clans. Why was Yu Hongji, who was already the #1 expert in Pingyang City, afraid of the city lord's mansion's warning? The reason was that the Qin clan, who ruled the great Emperor Qin kingdom, was too strong. Not only was their overall strength strong, but their cultivation method was also far superior. 10 moves. Cheng Zhangyu only lasted 10 moves before he was completely at a disadvantage. Therefore, he could only call for help from the Cheng clan disciples while questioning Qin Hua's sneak attack. Cheng Zhangyu's heart was filled with envy and jealousy when he heard that Qin Hua's goal in entering the primeval jungle was the blood ginseng, a 300-year-old blood ginseng. Compared with the 300-year-old blood ginseng, the spirit fruit that he had painstakingly obtained could only be regarded as an ordinary spirit medicine. Although he was extremely envious and jealous, he was also very clear that this was everyone's opportunity and could not be forced. Therefore, he told Qin Hua very clearly that he did not participate in the snatching of the blood ginseng, nor did he send people to ambush them. He even took the initiative to let Qin Hua search the bodies of his dead brothers. Unfortunately, Qin Hua, who was blinded by anger, didn't believe Cheng Zhangyu's words at all. What's more, he proposed a condition that Cheng Zhangyu couldn't accept, which was to search every Cheng family member present, including Cheng Zhangyu. How could Cheng Zhangyu agree to such an excessive request? If he allowed Qin Hua to search his body, not only would his prestige be swept to the ground, but there would also be an irremovable stain in his future life. How would he be able to smoothly inherit the Cheng clan in the future? Not to mention, in order to ensure the success of this mission, he had used his family's secret that had been hidden for many years. Therefore, there was no way he would allow Qin Hua to search him. In a situation where they couldn't come to an agreement, the two sides could only fight it out. At the same time, in order to avoid attracting the attention of the rank 9 exotic beast, they consciously withdrew from the depths of the forest while killing each other. Unfortunately, Cheng Zhangyu underestimated Qin Hua's anger after losing the blood ginseng and overestimated their combined strength. In just a few short minutes, he had lost 2 Cheng family members. Not to mention how he was going to explain this to his family when he returned. Moreover, as their numbers continued to dwindle, it became more and more difficult for them to resist Qin Hua's crazy attacks. At the same time, Qin Hua's outstanding performance had caused him to have a morbid desire for a profound cultivation technique. If he had cultivated a cultivation technique that surpassed high-grade yellow rank, then the one at a disadvantage in today's battle wouldn't have been him. Therefore, he only wanted to end the slaughter and quickly return to his family. He wanted to use the spirit fruit to increase his cultivation and strength and strive to enter the sect. After stopping, Qin Hua said in a cold tone, "You want me to believe you? Sure. It's still the same condition as before. Let me personally search your bodies." Qin Hua chose to stop not because he was being benevolent. Although he cultivated a low-grade, profound rank cultivation technique, his cultivation was the same as Cheng Zhangyu's, only at the peak of 8th grade martial disciple. In order to pursue the person who had stolen the blood ginseng, he had used a few moves that consumed a lot of yuan li to kill the exotic beasts blocking his way. At the same time, Cheng Zhangyu was no weakling. In order to defeat him, Qin Hua had overdrawn his own Yuan Li. Therefore, at this moment, he had consumed a lot of Yuan Li and was nearing his limit. If it weren't for the unwillingness in his heart, he would have chosen to let go long ago. Yes, but there is one thing you can't search. Looking at Qin Hua covered in blood and filled with killing intent, Cheng Zhangyu finally nodded in agreement. However, agreeing was one thing. The thing that could bring disaster to the Cheng family must not be discovered by Qin Hua. Therefore, he directly took out the cloth bag containing the item and swore with one hand raised high. Qin Hua, I, Cheng Zhangyu, swear on my martial path that the item in this bag is not the blood ginseng. If I am lying, then I will never break through to the martial warrior realm in this lifetime. Qin Hua chose to believe Cheng Zhangyu's words. At the same time, he could guess that the item in the cloth bag was of great importance. He didn't want to be a busybody, so of course he didn't want to be entangled. After nodding in agreement, Qin Hua took a deep breath and waited for his overdrawn Yuan Li to calm down. He first searched the bodies of the remaining 2 Cheng family members, but found nothing. Finally, he looked at Cheng Zhangyu. Cheng Zhangyu casually inserted his weapon into the ground and took the initiative to express his attitude. Since Cheng Zhangyu had already expressed his attitude, Qin Hua didn't delay. Apart from the cloth bag, Qin Hua began to search Cheng Zhangyu. In addition to some scattered silver, a few hidden weapons that were contaminated with poison, and a few ordinary martial arts books, Qin Hua also found a 200-year-old Yuan Li fruit that could be used to directly increase one's cultivation. Its grade barely reached the first grade of the 9th level. Not bad. Looking at the fruit that was the size of a baby's fist, Qin Hua gave a simple comment and then ignored it. Perhaps because of his background, Qin Hua didn't care for the first grade of the 9th level Pei Yuan Li fruit. However, for Yu Haoran of the Victor, he needed the Yuan Li fruit very much. In his previous life, Yu Haoran was the vicious sword emperor whose name shook the cultivation world. In addition to being familiar with poisons, he was also good at alchemy. After all, a poisonous pill was the most effective way to fuse different poisons and unleash the strongest power. As the name implied, the Yuan Li fruit had the effect of strengthening one's foundation. After directly consuming it, there was a 70% chance that it could increase one's cultivation by 1 stage. Chapter 23. Inside the Primitive Forest. To Yu Haoran, directly consuming the foundation fruit to increase one's cultivation was a waste of the true value of the foundation fruit. If the foundation fruit was used as the main ingredient and combined with 8 other common herbs, one could refine the foundation elixir suitable for martial disciples and martial warriors. The foundation elixir could not only increase one's cultivation, but also strengthen one's meridians and dantian, strengthening one's foundation. In the sect, the foundation elixir was used as a reward for cultivating elite disciples. After a careful search, Qin Hua did not find any trace of the blood ginseng. He felt that his initial suspicions were wrong. Perhaps the person who had stolen the blood ginseng had deliberately misled him into thinking that Wu Zhangyu had stolen it. The purpose of doing so was not only to obtain the blood ginseng, but also to provoke a conflict between the city lord's mansion and the Cheng clan. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Therefore, Qin Hua's suspicions quickly shifted to the Yu and Wu clans. Only these 2 clans could come up with such a plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. However, Qin Hua was more inclined towards the Yu clan. If not for the city lord's mansion's interference, the Yu clan would have destroyed the Cheng and Wu clans 5 years ago and unified Pingyang City. With the help of the city's resources, not only could Yu Hongji break through to the martial grandmaster realm, but the entire Yu clan could also be promoted to a 9th rank clan. Thinking of this, Qin Hua hurriedly asked Cheng Zhangyu, after entering the forest, "Did you meet Yu Haoqing or Wu Zhenghao of the Wu clan?" Shaking his head, Cheng Zhangyu replied, "No. In fact, before entering the forest, other than Wu Xingjun of the Wu clan, I did not see any disciples of the 2 clans." Speaking of this, Cheng Zhangyu could not help but frown. Although Wu Xingjun was also a direct descendant of the Wu family, his talent and strength were relatively good, but with Cheng Li's strength, it shouldn't be a problem for him to defeat and kill Wu Jingjun. However, more than half a day had passed since they entered the forest, and Cheng Li still hadn't shown up. He couldn't help but worry that Wu Jingjun might have some means that he didn't know about, causing Cheng Li to suffer a hidden loss. As for Yu Haoran, in Cheng Zhangyu's heart, he was like a waste. He didn't take it seriously at all. He never thought that Cheng Li would suffer a loss because of him, let alone suspect that he had snatched the precious blood ginseng. If that's the case, I'll take my leave first. Since Qin Hua suspected that the blood ginseng had been taken away by the Yu or Wu clans, he was worried that they would leave the forest with the blood ginseng. Therefore, he hurried to the exit of the forest to stop them. Therefore, after bidding farewell, Qin Hua turned around and rushed out of the forest. Watching Qin Hua leave quickly, Cheng Zhangyu thought of what he had just asked about Yu Haoqing and Wu Jinghao of the Wu clan. He understood the connection between the two clans. However, unlike Qin Hua's suspicions, Cheng Zhangyu's target of suspicion was the Wu clan. It was the Wu clan's equally famous Wu Jinghao. A year ago, the young disciples of the four major forces in Pingyang City had a competition. It was also because of that competition that Pingyang City was known as the Three Sons of One Pearl. One Pearl referred to the number one beauty of the Yu clan and also the number one beauty of Pingyang City. At the same time, she was also the goddess in the hearts of countless men in Pingyang City, Yusiki. Yusiki was not only beautiful, but also had a gentle personality. She had also inherited her parents' outstanding talent for cultivation. During that competition, she defeated all the heroes and won the championship. According to the speculation of a few elite martial masters in Pingyang City, Yusiki should be the first genius of the younger generation to break through to the martial warrior and martial master realms. She was also the most promising genius of the younger generation to break through to the martial grandmaster realm. Unfortunately, following the accidental death of the number one expert of Pingyang City, Yu Hongji, and the cruel internal strife within the Yu clan, Yusiki, whose cultivation had been destroyed, became an ordinary person. She had completely lost her brilliance. The three sons referred to the three most outstanding young male geniuses in Pingyang City. They were Qin Hua from the city lord's residence, Wu Jinghao from the Wu clan, and Cheng Zhangyu from the Cheng clan. Other than Wu Jinghao, who was also one of the three sons, no one else in Pingyang City could snatch the blood ginseng from Qin Hua's hands. At the same time, from the way he met Wu Jingjun at the entrance of the primitive forest, it was very likely that Wu Jinghao was like him, leading the clan's disciples into the forest in advance. Perhaps the reason why Cheng Li had not appeared until now was that he had encountered Wu Jinghao and the others. If things were as he guessed, then Qin Hua and Wu Jinghao would have a conflict. Would he be able to reap the benefits? Thinking of the overall improvement that the 300-year-old blood ginseng could bring, Cheng Zhangyu could no longer control the greed in his heart. From the cloth bag on the ground, Cheng Zhangyu took out a slightly dark elixir that exuded a strong fragrance. He then handed the cloth bag to the remaining clan members and instructed, "You guys take the black saliva ball back to the clan. I have something to deal with. Brother, you be careful." Seeing Cheng Zhangyu use the elixir that he had kept for a long time, the two young disciples of the Cheng clan could roughly guess his thoughts. Therefore, after warning him, they quickly left the depths of the forest with the cloth bag. After the two clan members left the depths of the forest, Cheng Zhangyu observed the situation around him. His gaze finally stopped at the bush where Victor was hiding. Without any delay, Cheng Zhangyu hid in the bush in a flash. He then calmed his heart and concentrated his qi, intending to use the elixir to restore the Yuan Li that he had just consumed. Looking at Cheng Zhangyu's hiding place and the distance between Victor and Cheng Zhangyu, Yu Haoran's face revealed a trace of a strange smile. Because Cheng Zhangyu's hiding place was less than 10 centimeters away from Victor, if he wanted to sneak attack him, he did not need to go out of the Victor. He only needed to reach out his arm. Since the opportunity was in front of him, how could Yu Haoran give up? However, he was not in a hurry to make a move. Because Cheng Zhangyu was still very vigilant, If he rashly made a move, it would definitely attract his attention. Moreover, there was only one chance to make a sneak attack. Although his current strength was not inferior to his opponent's, and he had full confidence that he could kill him, he did not want to fight Chen Zhongyu face to face. Therefore, he had to wait for the best time to make a move. After a minute, Chen Zhongyu, who was ready, wanted to swallow the elixir. At the same time, Yu Haoran, who had already gathered all his Yuan Li, touched the imprint with his mind, and a fist containing 9 layers of Yuan Li heavily smashed towards Chen Zhongyu's head. Not good. Chen Zhongyu, who was about to take the elixir, suddenly felt a fatal warning in his heart, so he subconsciously wanted to lower his head. Chapter 24. In the Primeval Forest. After killing Chen Zhongyu, Yu Haoran took the opportunity to leave the victor. Looking at Chen Zhongyu, whose head had been blown to pieces, Yu Haoran could not help but sigh. In fact, this world lacked everything but geniuses. This was especially so after leaving Pingyang City and entering the more competitive sections. Geniuses were as numerous as carps crossing the river. What was a genius? Only those who could survive and stand at the peak of martial arts could be considered geniuses. A dead genius was not a genius, but a corpse. At the same time, Yu Haoran was very clear that Pingyang City would be in chaos for a period of time. After all, Chen Zhongyu's identity was not simple. Not only was he the leader of the younger generation of the Chen clan, but his father was also the clan leader of the Chen clan. He was one of the top experts in Pingyang City. However, the chaos in Pingyang City would not affect him in the slightest. Instead, it would help him to improve his cultivation and better perform himself in the sex selection competition. Putting aside his complicated feelings, he bent down to pick up the elixir from Chen Zhongyu's hands. After taking a closer look, he realized that it was the lowest grade of Qi Refining Elixir. Qi Refining Elixir was suitable for martial disciple realm disciples to use when they meditated and cultivated. It was also one of the daily benefits for low-level disciples in the sections. At the same time, Qi Refining Elixir was also the currency used by low-level disciples in the sects to trade with each other. It was the same currency they used in Pingyang City. However, the Qi Refining Elixir that Chen Zhongyu had was only the lowest grade of level 10 elixir. Only the lowest status servant disciples would be willing to consume elixirs of this grade. In his previous life, to him, the Vicious Sword Emperor, this grade of elixir was something that he would not even look at even if it was thrown to the side of the road, let alone consume it. But now, Yu Haoran put away the Qi Refining Elixir and the level 9 first grade essence nurturing fruit in a good mood. He raised his head and looked around. Then he bent down and picked up Chen Zhongyu's body and placed it directly under a big tree. Then, he used Chen Zhongyu's sharp sword to cut open the body and let the blood flow out. Finally, he flashed and hid behind a big tree. When a carnivorous tier, 10 high-tier exotic beast appeared beside the corpse and started devouring it in large mouthfuls, Yu Haoran quietly left the depths of the forest. The blood ginseng was already in his hands, and the energy cultivation fruit and energy refining pills were unexpected gains. This trip to the jungle could be said to be a great harvest. Therefore, Yu Haoran planned to immediately return to the Yu clan and use Victor's time acceleration ability to raise his cultivation to the peak of the 9th grade martial disciple before the sex selection. As long as his cultivation reached the peak of the 9th grade of martial disciple, he would not be afraid of anyone below the 3rd grade of martial warrior, let alone the younger generation of Pingyang City. However, just as Yu Haoran retreated to the outskirts of the forest and approached the exit, he unexpectedly discovered that Qin Hua, who was guarding the exit, was negotiating with more than 10 martial artists. After carefully listening to the contents of the negotiation, Yu Haoran could not help but furrow his brows. Qin Hua, who had lost the blood ginseng, was on the verge of insanity. He, who was guarding the exit of the forest, began to tyrannically search every martial artist who wanted to leave the forest to find out who had stolen the blood ginseng. Touching the 2 boxes in front of his chest, Yu Haoran finally chose to retreat a few dozen meters and climb to the top of a bowl-sized tree, to temporarily avoid Qinhua. Although he could put a quarter of the blood ginseng in the box containing the energy cultivation fruit into Victor, he was still a little worried when he considered the conditions that Victor had proposed in exchange for half of the blood ginseng. Moreover, his identity was a little special. If he suddenly showed himself, it was very likely that he would be harassed, which would lead to unnecessary trouble. Therefore, he planned to wait for Qinhua to withdraw before leaving the forest. Since he could not leave the forest in a short period of time, Yuhaoran planned to use this time to raise his cultivation to the peak of 6th grade martial disciple with the help of Victor and energy refining pills. Then, he would continue to comprehend the reckless bull fist and strive to reach perfection as soon as possible. As time passed, Qinhua, who was guarding the exit of the forest, gradually became gloomy. Most of the strange beasts in the forest rested during the day and hunted at night. Therefore, the best time to enter the forest was during the day. At night, not to mention a martial disciple, even a martial warrior wouldn't dare to go in. Now, the sun had set in the west and the sky was turning red. Most of the martial artists who had entered the forest had already left, but he still did not find any clues about the blood ginseng. This made him suspicious. He suspected that when he was fighting with Cheng Zhangyu and the others, the mastermind who had stolen the blood ginseng might have already left the forest with the blood ginseng. Looking at the gradually darkening forest, Qinhua reluctantly stomped his feet and left the forest. Half an hour after Qinhua left the forest, when the sky was completely dark, a ghost-like figure appeared at the exit of the forest. The figure turned his head to look at the forest behind him, sighed, and quietly left the forest. The Yu clan residence. Looking at Yuhaoran, who was covered in blood and emitting a fierce killing intent, the two Yu clan guards at the entrance looked at each other and saw the horror in each other's eyes. The news of Yuhaoran killing Wang Ru and defeating He Jiqiang had already caused a huge commotion within the Yu clan. All the clansmen of the Yu clan were waiting for the Grand Elder and the Hall Master of the Azure Dragon Hall, Yu Hanyang, to make a move. However, an entire day had already passed, and everyone was surprised to find that the First Elder and Yu Hanyang did not show any signs of making a move. This made them feel strange. At the same time, the news of Yuhaoran returning to the Yu clan covered in blood also caused the Yu clan to speculate. They suspected that the First Elder and the others had actually made a move, but they did not succeed. Thinking that Yuhaoran was actually able to successfully kill the assassins sent by the First Elder, the Yu clan people's view of Yuhaoran increased by another level. Chores area, Yuhaoran's courtyard. After cleaning his body and changing into a clean set of clothes, Yuhaoran stood in the courtyard in high spirits. Standing in front of him was Lin Yun from the punishment hall. Seeing Yuhaoran in high spirits and without the slightest injury, Lin Yun asked in shock, "Young patriarch, the assassins sent by the First Elder were all killed by you?" As the person who secretly protected Yuhaoran and his sister, Lin Yun usually stayed in Yuhaoran's courtyard. Therefore, when Yuhaoran had just returned to the courtyard, Lin Yun had already discovered him. As a peak 9th grade martial warrior who could break through to martial master at any time and become an expert in the upper echelons of the Yu clan, Lin Yun was also a veteran of hundreds of battles and had experienced many massacres. He was used to seeing blood. Although Yuhaoran had explained that the blood on his body was accidentally stained when he was hunting a mutated beast, Lin Yun still discovered that the blood on his body was not only mutated beast blood, but also human blood. This was why he was suspicious. "Lin Yun, on account of the fact that you have secretly protected me for a year, I will explain one last time. I did not have any conflict with the First Elder. The blood on my body is only mutated beast blood. If you continue to disturb me, then don't blame me for falling out with you." Yuhaoran, who was a little annoyed by Lin Yun's questioning, said with a displeased expression, "All right." Although he agreed verbally, Lin Yun's eyes were still filled with disbelief. Chapter 25. Yu Clan, Handyman District. Although Wang Ru's attack was heavy, Yusiki's foundation was still good before she was crippled. Coupled with the careful treatment of the doctor and the top-grade medicine sent by Yu Haoqing, she was able to move freely after nearly a day of rest. Now that her body was better, she couldn't help but think about random things. She thought about Yu Haoran majestically killing Wang Ru and recreating her father's glory. She was also worried that he would suffer the revenge of the great elder and die on the streets, cutting off her father's bloodline. In her confusion, Yusiki had to get up and take a walk in the courtyard to get rid of the distracting thoughts in her heart. When Yu Haoran rushed to the courtyard, he just happened to see Yusiki taking a walk in the courtyard. Seeing Yusiki recovering well, Yu Haoran happily shouted, "Sister." Xiao ran. Hearing the long-awaited voice, Yusiki also excitedly responded. Walking in front of Yusiki and seeing her normal complexion, Yu Haoran asked with concern, "Sister, how is your body recovering?" The doctor Yu Haoqing invited is very skilled, and the top-grade medicine he sent is also very effective. The wound on my back has already begun to scab, and it will be almost healed in a few days. Although she knew that Yu Haoqing's goal was not pure, the kind-hearted Yusiki was still very grateful for everything he did. Moreover, she was now able to recuperate in peace thanks to Yu Haoqing's arrangement. In this regard, Yu Haoran curled his lips. He felt a headache because of his sister's overly kind-hearted character. He had some thoughts about whether to get rid of Yu Haoqing in advance. However, now was not the time to be entangled with her character, but to let her pull herself together. Since the wound on her back had already scabbed, it meant that the wound was more than half healed. Therefore, Yu Haoran planned to let her recover her crippled cultivation in advance, and then seize the time to use the blood ginseng to further improve her cultivation and potential. "Sister, I will give you a gift later, a big gift that you can't imagine." "What gift?" Hearing that her brother was going to give her a gift, Yusiki asked very happily. At the same time, she inexplicably felt grateful to He Jiqiang. If He Jiqiang hadn't given Yu Haoran a slap to wake him up, how would he have been able to regain the closeness of his younger brother, let alone receive his gift? "Sis, let's talk inside." Although there was no one in the courtyard, Yu Haoran knew that there were countless pairs of eyes staring at them. Therefore, he could only bring Yusiki into the house to talk. Seeing Yu Haoran's secretive look, Yusiki's curiosity was piqued, and she couldn't help but ask, "Little Ran, what gift is it?" "Sis, close your eyes." Yu Haoran instructed as he gestured for Yusiki to sit cross-legged on the bed. Yu Haoran's strange behavior made Yusiki feel a little ridiculous. However, her younger brother had finally begun to value family affection. She cherished it very much, so she didn't refuse Yu Haoran's request and obediently closed her eyes. "Thaling, you can begin." After Yusiki closed her eyes, Yu Haoran instructed the Thaling that had already been connected. "Okay." Glancing at Yusiki, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, the Thaling and the victor responded. Then, it stretched out its hand and pointed at the void. A milky white energy passed through the victor, passed through Yu Haoran's sea of consciousness, and appeared above Yusiki's head. The milky white energy flowed through the top of Yusiki's head and entered her body. At the same time, Yusiki, who originally had a gentle expression, began to frown. She closed her eyes tightly and wanted to open them. Seeing that Yusiki wanted to open her eyes, Yu Haoran, who was afraid that she would discover something abnormal, hurriedly warned her, "Sis, calm your chi and concentrate. You must endure the transformation of the energy in your body. In the end, you'll have an unexpected harvest." Yusiki, who originally wanted to open her eyes to question Yu Haoran, hurriedly closed her eyes after hearing his warning. This was because she had already sensed the existence of the energy and also sensed that the energy was transforming her body. At the same time, she was also aware of the benefits that the energy had for her. As the energy transforming Yusiki's body continued to weaken, the Thaling and the victor suddenly felt that something was wrong. It couldn't help but use its divine sense to quietly observe Yusiki's physique. After confirming Yusiki's true situation, the Thaling couldn't help but complain, "This is bad. I didn't think that this little girl would have this kind of physique. It seems that this time I'm going to suffer a loss." Although its mouth was full of complaints, its complaining tone was full of joy. It was enough to show that the Thaling didn't care about suffering a loss. Just as the energy in Yusiki's body was about to disappear, the Thaling once again stretched out its finger. This time, two streams of milky white energy entered her body. Yu Haoran, who had been observing the situation, saw that the Thaling had used two streams of milky white energy. He looked at it thoughtfully and already had a guess in his heart. However, he didn't question the Thaling. He only suppressed this guess in the bottom of his heart. He planned to use a spiritual medicine that was more than 10 times more precious than the blood ginseng when he entered the sect in the future. It contained life force and would repay the favor today. Half an hour later, after the two streams of energy had completely disappeared, the weak Yusiki suddenly straightened her body. Immediately after, a powerful aura rapidly rose from her body. Not good. Feeling the powerful aura rapidly rising from Yusiki's body, Yu Haoran's expression changed, and he secretly cursed. Although exposing his astonishing cultivation talent and strength would shock the members of the Yu clan, it wouldn't cause them to have any suspicions. This was because he might have inherited his parents' outstanding cultivation talent. It was normal for him to have such achievements. However, if they were to discover that Yusiki's Dantian had been restored, not only would it arouse their suspicions, it would also attract their greed and madness. After all, in this world, in order to restore the cultivation of a person whose Dantian had been destroyed, it would require at least 5th-level spiritual medicine and pills. Therefore, they would definitely suspect that he had obtained a heaven-defying opportunity. At that time, it would probably attract the attention of those old fellows who usually didn't care about the clan's affairs and had always wanted to break through to the martial ancestor realm. When he touched the imprint with his mind and wanted to ask Thaling to keep Yusiki in the victor, Thaling, who had long been prepared, stretched out his hand and pointed. A faint milky white energy barrier directly enveloped Yusiki and also compressed the aura produced by her breakthrough into the energy barrier. Seeing Thaling act, Yu Haoran secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Moreover, through the imprint in his sea of consciousness, he spoke to Thaling. Thaling, I, Yu Haoran, will remember today's kindness in my heart. I will definitely repay you in the future. After receiving Yu Haoran's promise, Thaling nodded in satisfaction. It didn't make a loss just now in vain. However, when Thaling thought about how Yusiki actually possessed the legendary physique, he was shocked. At the same time, he was also considering whether or not to tell Yu Haoran about it. This was because that special physique was too heaven-defying. If she could be specially nurtured according to her special physique, she would at least be able to become a peerless expert at the peak of martial honor realm. If Yusiki could become a martial god, not only would the other divine weapon of time travel not be too dangerous, he would even have the opportunity to devour it and perfect his own laws. After her aura had reached its peak, Yusiki slowly began to withdraw her aura and finally returned to normal. Then, she opened her eyes and looked straight at Yu Haoran. Chapter 26. Yu Clan, Servant District. As the most talented person in Pingyang City, Yusiki had reached the peak of the 6th grade of Martial Disciple in just 1 year and was known as the most dazzling pearl of light in Pingyang City. Seeing that her father alone was able to suppress the Chung and Wu clans and make the Yu clan the strongest power in Pingyang City, Yusiki's desire for strength was no less than that of a normal man. However, the unforeseen event a year ago filled her with fear. The moment her Dantian was destroyed, she was disheartened. If it wasn't for the fact that Yu Haoran was too young and was suddenly demoted to a servant, she was afraid that he would take things too hard and look for a dagger. She suppressed the desire to die in her heart and barely managed to live on. Now, with the help of the recovery of her cultivation, she had broken through to the 7th grade of Martial Disciple in one fell swoop. Moreover, that special energy had also expanded her meridians and strengthened her Dantian, causing her strength to rise and her potential to be greatly enhanced. It had increased her chances of breaking through to the martial ancestor realm in the future. She had reignited her fighting spirit. Sister, don't say and don't ask. You just need to know that I did it. For the time being, Yu Haoran couldn't explain what the tower spirit had done. He could only shut her mouth from the start and not let her ask any more questions. Looking deeply at Yuhaoran, Yusiki knew that her brother must have had a heaven-defying opportunity that outsiders did not know about. Regarding this, she was only filled with joy and did not have the slightest bit of jealousy. Xiao Ran, don't worry. From now on, sister will take care of any difficulties for you. Yusiki said heroically. All right, Yuhaoran agreed with a smile. In fact, he did not need Yusiki's protection at all. Because of the qi refining pill that he took from Cheng Zhongyu and Victor's ability to accelerate time, his cultivation had not only reached the peak of the 6th grade of martial disciple, but his understanding of the reckless bull fist technique had also reached perfection. At this moment, even if he faced an opponent at the peak of the 9th grade of martial disciple, he had 100% confidence that he could defeat them. However, thinking that his sister was in a good mood now, he did not want to ruin her happy mood. After getting off the bed, Yusiki couldn't help but pace back and forth in the room. Although Yuhaoran understood, he still hoped that his sister could calm down. This was because he still had another treasure to give away. Sis, control your emotions a little. All right. After taking a few deep breaths, Yusiki gradually calmed down. But when she saw the elixirs that Yuhaoran had taken out, her mood that had calmed down with great difficulty once again became excited. Little Ran, TT, this isn't the legendary blood ginseng that can increase one's cultivation and potential, right? Yusiki stuttered as she pointed at the remaining quarter of the spirit medicine in the box. A year ago, before Yu Hongji's accident, when Yu clan still controlled more than half of the resources in Pingyang City, Yusiki had seen many treasures. She had even seen level 9, 6th grade spirit medicine. However, she had only heard of the blood ginseng that could increase one's cultivation, vitality, and potential. She had never seen it before, so she asked with uncertainty. That's right, this is the blood ginseng. Moreover, it's 300 years old and is already a level 9, 1st grade blood ginseng. Yuhaoran introduced with a smile. Little Ran, your talent far surpasses mine. This blood ginseng should be used by you. Although the temptation of the blood ginseng was great, Yusiki quickly controlled her inner desire to possess it. Then, she pushed the box of blood ginseng in front of Yuhaoran and said, Sis, you didn't see that there's only a quarter of the blood ginseng left. I've already kept the other 3/4, so you can rest assured and use it. Yuhaoran was not surprised by Yusiki's refusal. He knew that his sister doted on him, so he could only choose to lie. Is that so? Taking a closer look at the wound of the blood ginseng, she found that the wound was very neat. Obviously, it had been carefully prepared before it was removed. Therefore, she believed Yuhaoran's explanation. Although she didn't want to accept it, when she thought of her bold words and the fact that she had delayed for more than a year, Yusiki finally decided to keep this quarter of the blood ginseng. Sis, a quarter of the blood ginseng is almost enough for you to break through to the 8th grade martial disciple. However, you know our current situation, so when you're ready to break through, it's best to let me know. I have a way to cover up the movement when you break through. Seeing Yusiki accept the blood ginseng, Yuhaoran breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he thought of the movement caused by his sister's breakthrough, as well as her own good talent, and hurriedly exhorted. I know. Nodding, Yusiki indicated that she understood. Okay, sis, your cultivation has just been restored. You still need to further comprehend. I won't disturb your cultivation. I'll leave first. After exhorting, Yuhaoran got up and left the room. In this regard, Yusiki didn't urge him to stay, because she knew very well that there wasn't much time left for the two of them. Now, every minute, every second was very precious. They had to seize every minute and every second to improve their strength so that they could be able to deal with the danger that could come at any time. Time passed day by day. The impact of Yuhaoran killing Wang Ru and defeating He Jiqiang was not the slightest bit weakened. Instead, the movement was getting bigger and bigger. Because the first elder and the others had not made a move, it aroused the curiosity of the people. After many inquiries, the people of the Yu family found out that the first elder and Yu Hongyang had quietly left the family in the morning of the incident. Therefore, they didn't make a move to deal with Yuhaoran at the first time. At the same time, Everyone was very clear in their hearts that Yu Haoran's monstrous cultivation talent would definitely stimulate the First Elder and the others. The First Elder would never let Yu Haoran go so easily. Therefore, everyone was waiting for the return of the First Elder and the others. Finally, half a month after the incident, the First Elder and the others returned to the Yu family in high spirits. In the chores area, in the courtyard where Yu Haoran lived, Lin Yun was earnestly persuading him. Young clan leader, according to your subordinate's opinion, why don't you leave the Yu family now and wait until the sex selection begins, when martial arts are prohibited in Pingyang City? Moreover, I believe that with the young clan leader's talent, you will definitely be chosen by the top sex in this sex selection. From then on, you will be a carp that leaps over the dragon's gate and become a person above all others. The moment he knew that the First Elder and the others had returned to the family, Lin Yun immediately went to the disciplinary hall and found the Ninth Elder, hoping that he could take the initiative to warn the First Elder and the others to not take revenge on Yu Haoran. However, the Ninth Elder's attitude did not change at all. He only allowed him to secretly protect Yu Haoran and his sister, and did not allow him to intervene in anything outside of the protection. Burning with anxiety, Lin Yun had no choice but to take the initiative to persuade Yu Haoran to quickly leave the Yu family before the First Elder and the others knew the news. Yu Haoran looked at Lin Yun very meaningfully and said with a smile, "Lin Yun, aren't you afraid of being punished by the disciplinary hall for disobeying the Ninth Elder's orders?" "Sigh, of course I'm afraid, but compared to the safety of the young clan leader, I'd rather be punished than see something happen to you," Lin Yun said sincerely. In this regard, Yu Haoran believed his sincere words and was quite pleased in his heart. However, escaping from the Yu family was not Yu Haoran's style, and he was also confident in dealing with the threats and revenge of the First Elder and the others. The only thing he was worried about was Isiki. If the First Elder wanted to prevent future troubles, besides dealing with him, he would definitely send people to find Isiki. Therefore, when he really faced the First Elder, he needed to make arrangements for Isiki in advance. Chapter 27. Yu Haoran's courtyard in the servant district of the Yu clan. Lin Yun, what is your current cultivation level? Since he couldn't arrange for her to leave the Yu clan, he had to find a way to arrange for an expert to protect her, at least until the selection competition began. Young clan leader, your subordinate's cultivation level is already at the peak of 9th grade martial warrior. But to break through to the martial master realm, I'm afraid it will take me another 5 to 6 years. Lin Yun said gloomily. Although martial disciple, martial warrior, and martial master were only at the beginning stages of cultivation, they only targeted the meridian's body and Yuan Li in a martial warrior's body. However, when a martial warrior broke through to the martial master realm, they would face a very big problem, and that was the tempering of Yuan Li. Only when Yuan Li was tempered to a certain level could one release Yuan Li. Only by releasing Yuan Li could one break through to the martial master realm. Only when one's cultivation level broke through to the martial master realm would one be able to attack from a distance and have a say in the Yu clan. However, in order to temper Yuan Li to a certain level, one needed a strong will, a huge amount of energy, and a top-notch mental cultivation technique. He had a strong will, but he didn't have a huge amount of energy or a top-notch mental cultivation technique. Therefore, he could only rely on time to polish it bit by bit. Lin Yun, if I can help you break through to the martial master realm now, can you swear on your martial arts to help me do one thing? Yu Haoran knew why Lin Yun couldn't break through to the martial master realm for a long time, and he also had a solution. Pingyang City was too remote, so most of the martial arts here were incomplete. The mental cultivation technique of the disciplinary hall was called the Gale Mental Cultivation Technique. It was originally a top-notch mental cultivation technique collected by the Yu clan. However, because the Gale Mental Cultivation Technique was too incomplete, it couldn't be advanced to a higher level. Moreover, it was easy to go berserk during the cultivation process, so it had been placed in the Yu clan's library, until Yu Hongji came to power, and through his own experience and understanding, he improved and supplemented the Gale mental cultivation method bit by bit. Furthermore, he made the improved and supplemented Gale mental cultivation method the main mental cultivation method of the punishment hall. If Yu Hongji didn't have an accident, if Yu Hongji could break through to the martial ancestor realm, if Yu Hongji could continue to increase his experience, if that was the case, he would be able to further perfect the Gale Heart Sutra and allow the people of the disciplinary hall to break through the martial warrior realm and enter the martial master realm even faster. Then, the disciplinary hall would definitely surpass the Blue Dragon Hall and become the #1 hall of the Yu clan. Therefore, the entire punishment hall has always respected and protected Hongji. This is also one of the reasons why Lin Yun is willing to secretly protect Yu Haoran and his sister with his peak 9th grade martial warrior cultivation. Unfortunately, of course, with Yu Haoran's 100 years of experience in his previous life and his vision as a peak martial emperor, it was not impossible for him to perfect and complete the Gale Heart Sutra. But he didn't have to. In his previous life, when he was hunting down an enemy, he accidentally found the complete version of the Gale Heart Sutra on the enemy. At the same time, after reading the complete version of the Gale Heart Sutra, he realized that this Heart Sutra had reached the 9th level of the profound class. It was enough for him to reach the peak of the martial emperor realm. Really, after hearing Yu Haoran's suggestion, Lin Yun couldn't believe that it could allow him to break through the martial master realm. Although the martial master realm was also the initial stage of a martial artist cultivation, the power and status of a martial master was a far cry from that of a martial disciple and a martial warrior. If he could break through the martial master realm, then his status in the disciplinary hall and the Yu clan would at least increase by several times. Moreover, some of his opinions and ideas could not be directly rejected by the 9th elder like before. However, looking at Yu Haoran's young face and thinking that he had just reached adulthood a month ago, his originally excited mood instantly cooled down. In the end, he didn't believe that Yu Haoran had the ability to do so. The Gale Heart Sutra lies in the feet. When still, it is as warm as water. When moving, seeing that Lin Yun didn't believe in his ability, Yu Haoran didn't explain too much. He only mentioned a few key words that were missing in the Gale Heart Sutra regarding the martial warrior's breakthrough to the martial master realm. How is this possible? After carefully thinking about the key words that Yu Haoran had just mentioned, Lin Yun realized that his stagnant realm had a faint tendency to loosen up. At that moment, he began to believe Yu Haoran's words. However, as a top expert of the disciplinary hall, he quickly calmed down and considered Yu Haoran's suggestion. Young clan leader, what do you want me to do? Although he wanted to break through to the martial master realm, he needed to know what Yu Haoran wanted him to do. If he was asked to commit murder and arson, or do something that would harm the interests of the Yu clan, then he would rather give up the opportunity to break through to the martial master realm in advance. Lin Yun, you know the first elder and Yu Hongyang's character. They are not upright gentlemen. Although I have a way to deal with their threats and revenge, I am worried that they will make a move on my sister. Therefore, I hope that after you break through to the martial master realm, you can protect my sister 24/7. Although Lin Yun didn't say it explicitly, Yu Haoran could guess his misgivings, so he spoke frankly. Of course, I won't ask you to take care of her all the time. As long as you can protect her from any harm before the sex selection begins, our agreement will be considered complete. Young clan leader, no matter who wants to harm Miss Siki, they will have to step over my dead body first. Lin Yun swore solemnly. I believe in you. Yu Haoran nodded and took out a piece of paper from his sleeve. On it was the Gale Heart technique that he had written in advance. However, it could only be cultivated to the peak of the martial master realm. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Lin Yun, but the complete version of the Gale Heart technique was too important. He was worried that some people in the clan, driven by greed, would disregard the unspoken rules and do something crazy. Young clan leader, this subordinate's life is yours from now on. After taking the Gale Heart technique from Yu Haoran and carefully savoring it, Lin Yun found that the Gale Heart technique given by Yu Haoran was not only more complete, but it also specifically indicated the things to pay attention to when breaking through each small realm. Based on this piece of paper, Lin Yun knew that he would not only be able to break through to the martial master realm in a day at most, but he would also be able to correct the mistakes in his previous cultivation, further enhance his strength, and further strengthen his foundation. At this moment, how could he not be excited and grateful? Ever since Yu Hongji's accidental death, the shrewd Lin Yun immediately pledged his loyalty to Yu Haoran when he recalled what the clan had done over the past year. Lin Yun, as long as you can protect my sister, I won't treat you unfairly. Yu Haoran didn't refuse Lin Yun's pledge of loyalty, but he didn't nod in agreement either. In his previous life, after experiencing several betrayals from friends and subordinates, Yu Haoran found it difficult to easily trust others. He needed time to observe Lin Yun. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.